We come to today's business. I wish to make a brief statement. I previously indicated to the House that I intend to take specialist legal advice following the collapse of the prosecution of two individuals accused of espionage for the Chinese authorities. Members will be aware of my continuing disappointment about what has happened in this case and my desire to explore all possible options for action. I should inform the House that I've now taken that advice, and it appears there are no other legal routes to be pursued by the House in these cases. No doubt, others are considering whether options remain open to them, and if we can, I'm sure we can help. I know that future allegations will be dealt with under newer legislation. I should also take this opportunity to remind members of the updated security guidance that was issued last month. Right, we now come to questions. Secretary of State for Defence, Sir Russell.
Question number 1, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, I know the whole House is united in condemning the dreadful attacks on the LNER train from Doncaster to London over the weekend, and our thoughts are with the victims, their families and their friends. This is also the period where we mark remembrance, and thank you, Mr Speaker, for your ceremony in opening the Garden of Remembrance for constituencies this morning. We will wear our poppies with pride, and we will remember them. Mr Speaker, with permission, I would like to take and answer questions 1, 6 and 11 together. In September, we published our government's new defence industrial strategy, backed by nearly £800 million in funding. We are making defence an engine for driving economic growth. We are backing British jobs, backing British industry, backing British innovation.
Sir Russell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I recently visited Avocet, an innovative manufacturing company based in Holmes Chapel in my constituency. They are looking to grow their business by diversifying into supplying components and materials for drone battery production. However, they have expressed to me the potential for improved support and guidance from the government in order to break into and thrive within this competitive international market. Can the Minister please outline what steps his department is taking to support British manufacturing businesses such as Avocet, and does he agree with me that helping these organisations will unlock vital opportunities for economic growth?
I do indeed, Mr Speaker, and my honourable friend is right. It's firms like that in her constituency that hold the future of our security and hold the future of our economic growth. That's why we have set up UK Defence Innovation. We've ring-fenced it with at least £400 million in a budget this year with Fresh Freedoms, and we have doubled to £4 billion the amount of money that we will invest in British drones and autonomy over this Parliament.
Singh Johnson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. A key ingredient for strengthening the industrial base is the innovation our companies bring to the table. A&M EDM Limited in my constituency is a specialist engineering company working with aerospace, automotive, Formula One and other industry. And when I visited recently, they were testing a drone engine that they had designed and built, with most parts being produced in-house. So can the Minister tell me what routes are available to companies like A&M EDM Limited to bring their innovation, their specialist engineering capacity and research and development abilities to the defence industrial supply chain?
Indeed, UK Defence Innovation has been set up to transform Defence's innovation system, and one of its priorities is to foster collaboration with small and medium-sized firms in fields beyond defence, just like his constituency A&M EDM. And I have set out, Mr Speaker, my determination to see Britain become the best place to start, grow and invest in new defence companies.
Antonia Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and it's always good to follow another member for the Black Country. I was recently very pleased to meet Babcock International, based in Walsall, just over the M6 from my constituency, where they make armoured cars. Can the Minister comment on future opportunities for defence manufacturing in the Black Country and the wider West Midlands?
Yeah, Mr Speaker, I mean, the West Midlands has a very proud tradition of being at the heart of British invention and engineering, and it's got huge potential for the future of defence engineering and invention. In In the last year, the MOD has spent £1.7 billion directly into the region. That's the highest level for the last 10 years, Mr. Speaker. And my honourable friend, the Minister for Defence, Readiness and Industry, met her West Midlands Mayor just last week to discuss what other opportunities there may be for firms like hers, areas like hers, within the West Midlands.
So, Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister knows, the Secretary of State knows that, of course, I've brought over a company from Ukraine to be able to show what they can do with drones, and us getting hold of that technology generally from Ukraine helps us supply them and also supply ourselves. But the key issue I want to come down to here is the question concerning rare earth minerals. They're normally discussed in a business context, but they are critical to the defence of the United Kingdom, and having a supply directly owned by us here in this country must surely be a critical issue. I wonder if the Secretary of State has looked at this, talked to his colleagues in government and said, we need now a supply that we use here and we produce in our own country.
The short answer, Mr. Speaker, to the right honourable gentleman is yes. The slightly longer answer is we're doing so with close allies. We're also doing so with Ukraine, and he has been one of those voices in this House that has pushed us to do more with Ukraine industry, and I know he'll welcome what is a groundbreaking agreement with Ukraine, where they share for the first time with a country beyond Ukraine their intellectual property on critical interceptor drones called Octopus. We will develop that further, we'll manufacture them at scale, we'll do that within weeks and months, and we'll return thousands to Ukraine to help their fight against Putin.
Dave Dougal.
Speaker, the MOD spent £1.2 billion with SMEs in 24-25. Sadly, only 2.5% of that was with SMEs in Scotland, who report extreme difficulty in accessing the MOD for those contracts. This is an inevitable consequence of the MOD spending more in one region of England than it spends in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland put together. But does the Secretary of State agree with me that this is an undesirable outcome, and what steps will he take to increase SME expenditure by MOD in Scotland to at least Scotland's per capita share, which is what Scotland contributes to the cost of defence?
Well, the first useful step would, of course, be the Scottish Nationalist Government lifting its bar on any support for defence and associated firms, because that's one of the biggest problems for SMEs in Scotland in the defence field. They can't get any support for their own government, despite the big contribution they make to jobs, opportunities and security, not just for Scotland and for the UK.
Dame Caroline Dinage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As the Secretary of State says, the Defence Industrial Strategy promises to boost British exports, success British businesses and British jobs, and so I'm sure he's excited as I am about the Aralis bid to replace the Red Arrow Hawk aircraft, which would deliver around 600 skilled jobs at Standard Aero in my Gosport constituency. So will he ensure that there's an early decision on the replacement of the Hawk aircraft and that it fully reflects the opportunity here to create high-value jobs, drive exports, strengthen British sovereign capability and enable the United Kingdom to design and build its own aircraft?
Well, the right honourable lady, anyway, she's absolutely right. I'm very excited, like her, about the Defence Industrial Strategy. And she is right to urge me to make sure that we take an early decision over the replacement of the Hawk trainer. We will, and we will because this is a long overdue decision that should have been taken years ago by the previous administration and the previous Defence Procurement Minister.
Mr. David Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And may I take this opportunity to first associate this side of the House with the remarks made by the Secretary of State for Defence on the appalling attacks in Huntingdon over the weekend. Now, Mr. Speaker, we all know that the government cannot deliver a strong defence industrial base without seriously boosting defence spending. And yet, multiple media outlets have very recently reported that his department is asking the MOD to make cuts of £2.6 billion this financial year. So very simply, can he tell us what will be cut to find the money?
Quite simply, we have boosted defence investment. We've done so by a record amount since the end of the Cold War. We've done so 3 years earlier than their unfunded plans in the first place. And look, since the election, we've signed over 1,000 major contracts, 84% of those with British firms. We brought in £1.7 billion in foreign direct investment into defence. And we've won major export deals that they never managed. I signed on Monday with the Prime Minister an £8 billion deal with Turkey to buy 20 British Typhoons that will help secure 20,000 jobs in the wider supply chain for the years to come. I'd like to hear them welcome that.
Conrad.
Number 2, Mr. Speaker.
So state.
Mr. Speaker, we're making the most significant commitment and change to armed forces housing in 50 years. Within 6 months of the election, we acted to end the worst ever Tory privatisation. We brought back into public ownership 36,000 military homes, and now we're making the £9 billion investment over the next decade to bring those homes up to scratch, and at the same time we're supercharging the building of new housing on surplus defence land. These plans are set out in our new defence housing strategy, which we published today, and I'm placing a copy of this strategy in the library of the House.
Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in the week of Remembrance Sunday, it's important to restate that supporting our armed forces and their families is something we should be committed to every day. But over the last decade, 2/3 of armed forces service family accommodation was allowed to fall into such disrepair that they were deemed not fit for purpose by the Defence Committee. So could the Minister explain further how our consumer charter for armed forces families will ensure that we do provide homes fit for heroes?
Indeed, my honourable friend is right to recognise remembrance, not as a time that we just recognise the service of those in the past, but those who serve today. And we make demands on them that none of us would have to meet in other ways. We ask them to deploy at weeks' notice to the other side of the world. We ask them to move with their families every few years around the UK. And the very last thing they should worry about is whether their wives, husbands, partners and kids are living in cold, damp and leaky homes. And so we are ending what my honourable friend says is the Tory scandal of unfit forces housing, and we're getting Britain building the homes that we need on surplus defence.
Look, can I just say to the Chief Secretary, he's going to want to catch my eye for his own questions. Don't use all this ammunition up to chat. Leader them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the £9 billion investment into military housing, but could the Secretary of State reassure members, those serving and their families that responsive repairs won't be put on hold in the hope of getting a new bathroom, kitchen or heating system?
Well, indeed, Mr. Speaker, and what the introduction earlier this year of a new consumer standard has done is not just to raise the required standard of those repairs, but the response when they are needed. And we've seen over the first year of this government the number of complaints about forces housing, more than half from the high under the previous government. There will always be complaints, there will always be problems. We can't fix these problems overnight, but I am determined that we will. I am determined that this can be a nation in which we say proudly, we provide the homes fit for our heroes.
Sonia Kumar.
Number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The role of the West Midlands SMEs in support of our armed forces is absolutely vital for our national security. The MOD has just published our regional breakdown of defence spending in the West Midlands, where we spend £1.7 billion, the highest it has been on record, supporting 7,900 jobs. But that's not enough. We will spend an additional £2.5 billion extra with SMEs by 2028, helping to reinforce that defence can be an engine for growth.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Dudley, we have the Pensnet Estate, which is one of the largest industrial estates in Europe. Its home to nearly 200 businesses, including a variety of SMEs, range from plumbing to steelworks. What steps is my right honourable friend taking to ensure SMEs in Dudley have got the time and the space to bid for contracts? And will the Minister agree to holding a roundtable on defence on the Pensnet Estate?
Well, I'm grateful for the time that my honourable friend spent with me talking about SME potential in Dudley and across the West Midlands last week. There's a huge opportunity for directing more of the increasing defence budget at British firms, in particular at SMEs. I think there's huge potential with the skills base that we have in the West Midlands. I'd be very happy to take my honourable friend up on her offer of visiting Dudley and getting those businesses more involved with the defence supply chain.
Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister has heard what an amazing set of mid-sized businesses and large businesses we have in the Midlands, actually West Midlands, supporting defence. But we also have some amazing research universities in the West Midlands. What more is the MOD looking at doing to work closer with our universities to get them geared towards supporting our move to rearming this country?
Well, grateful for the right honourable gentleman for raising the important role that universities play. In the Defence Industrial Strategy published a few months ago, we set out our ambition to create a Defence Universities Alliance, bringing together the very best cutting-edge research taking place in our universities. We're working with Universities UK to put that together, and there'll be further announcements on that in very short order. But I hope universities and the right honourable gentleman's patch will be participating so we can grow our economy and keep our nation safe.
Sadiq Allison.
Question 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to answer 4 and 16 together. As we move towards warfighting readiness, this government is investing more of our rising defence budget in new technologies and innovation. And in these more dark and dangerous times, the need for more innovative solutions to address emerging challenges is paramount. On the 1st of July, we launched UK Defence Innovation, a £400 million fund, and will spend 10% of equipment budget on innovative technologies that will deliver for defence.
Sadiq Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend the Minister for their response. What pathways and training programmes are the Minister establishing to ensure that young people, like those in my constituency of North Somerset, can develop the specialist skills needed to become the defence innovators of the future? And is the Minister working with local colleges, universities and defence industry employers to create hubs of apprenticeships and career opportunities?
Well, can I thank my friend for his question? As a fellow South West MP, I know just how important it is that we invest in defence skills in the southwest of England and across the United Kingdom. The Defence Industrial Strategy sets out a £182 million skills package that will be delivering via Defence Technical Excellence colleges with our colleagues in DFE. But we need to go further, encouraging all our defence businesses, big and small, to invest in skills so we have the workforce of the future able to deliver those cutting-edge technologies. And I'm very happy meeting the honourable friend to discuss what more we can do in Somerset.
Law.
Mr. Speaker, whilst I greatly welcome the focus on innovation, cyber warfare remains one of those areas where the lines of responsibility are perhaps at least appear less clear. So with threats proliferating both abroad, for instance from Russia in the Sahel, and closer to home, even in many of our own in-trays, can the Minister set out where that responsibility for cyber warfare really lies?
I'm grateful. Keeping our nation safe in air, land and sea requires cyber and space capabilities as well. Defence was attacked 90,000 times in the cyber domain. That's roughly 250 attacks a day. That's why we're investing not only in the National Cyber Force, but with the Defence Cyber and Electromagnetic Force that we're standing up, working with our colleagues in the private sector to enhance defence its ability to not only repel attacks on the defence infrastructure, but harden UK resilience in the private and public sectors as well. There's more work between Defence and the Cabinet Office in that regard, but we need everyone to step up to defend our country in the cyberspace, and we can all do something by simply updating our operating systems that will make everyone that does so safer and more resilient.
With the best objective.
Speaker, I'd like to start by associating myself with the remarks from the Secretary of State with regards to the attack on the weekend. Last week, the Ministry of Defence announced the launch of Project Fairfax, which will see a defence technology cluster established alongside RAF Whitton in my Huntingdon constituency. I'd like to thank the Minister for his support in bringing this project forward. It's been warmly received not only by industry, but crucially by my constituents who are excited for the opportunity presented by specialist defence careers and increasing regional growth that will be delivered best by Option E of local government reform. But what steps could he take in giving Huntingdonshire the opportunity to create a wider defence ecosystem and to meet the eligibility criteria for consideration for funding from the Defence and Security Accelerator?
Mr. Speaker, can I first of all thank the honourable gentleman for the tone in which he spoke to the nation around the attack that took place in his constituency. He should feel very proud of the first responders from his area that responded to that attack. In relation to the opportunities that exist in his constituency, I was very pleased to meet him and the honourable friend from North West Cambridgeshire to look at how on a cross-party basis there can be a real opportunity seized around RAF Witten, supporting activities with local government to do so. I think the Defence Industrial Strategy sets out the framework for how that can be achieved. Local, national government working together with our armed forces and the private sector, as well as academia, to deliver that opportunity. I know that we're going to continue those discussions, but the opportunity at RAF Witten is real, and I'm very happy helping him deliver it.
Sir Bernard.
Mr. Speaker, can the Minister describe what he's doing within his own department so that his own officials actually reward, recognise and engage with innovation? Because the acquisition system in the MOD is notoriously bureaucratic, incredibly risk-averse, and makes it impossible for small companies in particular to engage with innovative projects in the department. What is he doing about that to get a wholesale transformation of the culture within his own department? Otherwise, all this money will be just wasted.
Well, I agree with the right honourable gentleman. His critique of the system we inherited from the last government, frankly, was not good enough. We do need to see procurement contracting times reduced. That's why in the Defence Industrial Strategy we set out our ambition to reduce 6-year procurements to 2 years, 2 years to 1 year, and 1 year down to 6 months. We're using innovative technologies like AI to help speed up that transition, and we're opening our Office of Small Business Growth at the start of next year, enabling more SMEs to be able to access defence contracts directly.
Andrew Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 5.
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, with permission, I'd like to answer question 5 and 22 together. The UK is playing a leading role in stepping up support for Ukraine. This year, we are spending the highest ever level of military aid to Ukraine through the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, which I chaired last month. We have, in this year alone, managed to get £50 billion worth of pledges of support for Ukraine from the 50-strong nation group. And tomorrow I will join defence ministers in the JEF coalition in Norway, where we will confirm a new partnership with Ukraine to strengthen our support further.
Drew Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly welcome the Defence Secretary's continued leadership on Ukraine. I visited Estonia in early September, just prior to the incident when 3 MiG-31 Russian fighter jets entered and stayed in Estonian airspace for 12 minutes, and a further dangerous escalation of tensions in the region. Even before this incident, the sense that I got from Estonian politicians I met was that they were very much on the front line, and there's deep concern that if Russia succeeds in Ukraine, that they'll be next. What assurances can he give that contingency plans are in place to support our NATO allies in the face of continued Russian aggression?
Can I commend my honourable friend and members of all sides in this House that visit Ukraine? It's an important sense of support and confidence that members can give to those fighting in Ukraine. My honourable friend is right. Putin's incursions into NATO airspace are reckless, they're dangerous, and they only serve to strengthen the unity of NATO. And NATO responded swiftly to those incursions, and I recently extended the UK's Typhoon contribution to that Eastern Sentry exercise to the end of the year. The UK remains the framework nation for the forward land forces in Estonia. We have almost 10,000 UK troops in Estonia. It strengthens the deterrence of NATO, and that's something I'll be discussing with JEF defence ministers this week in Norway.
Paul Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the commitments made by the coalition of the willing for further military support for the protection of Ukraine's airspace. However, Ukraine continues to endure daily aerial attacks targeted at civil infrastructure as Russia seeks to use the approaching winter as a tool of torment. In light of this, can the Minister clarify what specific air defence capabilities have been pledged to safeguard Ukraine's skies and protect critical infrastructure?
My honourable friend is right. Putin's aerial bombardment of Ukraine, it's cynical, it's illegal, it's targeted at civilians. And that's why we've stepped up our efforts to reinforce Ukraine's air defence. This autumn we've delivered over 200,000 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition and hundreds of air-to-air missiles. And in September we announced what is the first of its kind, a joint programme for the new interceptor drone, the Octopus, which will be produced in the UK, will be manufactured at scale, and we aim to deliver thousands a month back into Ukraine to help defend their skies, defend their cities and defend their energy infrastructure.
Sir Julian Lewis.
As we build up towards Remembrance Sunday, does the Secretary of State agree that it's appropriate for us to remember the circumstances under which 2 world wars began, when democracies were relatively weak in the face of armed autocracies? And therefore, does he agree with me that the help that we give to Ukraine is the best possible guarantee that aggressors won't be emboldened to attack other countries as well?
I do indeed, Mr. Speaker. If big countries believe they can redraw international boundaries by force and get away with it, then no democracy and no state is safe. And I agree with the right honourable gentleman. A secure, sovereign Ukraine is central to Europe's security in the future.
James Shannon.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Secretary of State very much for his answer. Reports in the papers indicate there's 150,000 new Russian soldiers being prepared for an onslaught and an attack in eastern Ukraine. It's very clear that, and I don't doubt for one second that the Secretary of State and the Labour government and this Parliament are committed to doing something, but reports seem to be indicating that other countries are slowing back in what they give. Has the Minister been able to encourage other countries to ensure that what we give, that they will replicate and do the same? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the answer to that is yes, through the Ukraine Defence Contact Group, 50 strong nations committed to stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Together, we have secured £50 billion of pledges in military aid to Ukraine in this year alone, and I'm proud of the way that the UK has stepped in alongside Germany to lead that group. It's part of what we're doing with others to step up support for Ukraine, which will be needed even more in the months to come.
Timothy?
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to answer questions 7 and 24 together. The very reason that I left the military was because the lessons from Ukraine, particularly around uncrewed systems, weren't being learnt within our military. The drone architecture was exceptionally limited, despite watching the revolutionary character conflict for about 2 years. Since then, the Strategic Defence Review stepped in, £4 billion on autonomous systems, a Defence Uncrewed Systems Centre, training, tactics, procedures, doctrine and concepts are all changing to inculcate uncrewed systems.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer. The biggest drone manufacturer in Ukraine, Ukraine Spec Systems, is investing £200 million in Britain, opening a factory in Mildenhall in the west of the county and creating 500 jobs directly and through the supply chain. But like all manufacturers, they are facing rising energy costs and tax bill that is likely to go up. So if the Minister does want greater drone capacity in Britain, what's he doing to talk to his colleagues in the Energy Department and the Business Department to make sure that the whole government is pulling in the same direction?
So I'd like to thank the honourable friend for his question. Part of the Drone Uncrewed Centre of Excellence is trying to pool all those governments together to make the system easier to deal with for small and medium enterprises. I'd also like to pay tribute to UKRespect that have been providing drones to Ukraine for the last 3 years, and they've been used to very high effect in that country.
Paul Holmes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I refer the House to my entry in the register. The Minister may be aware of Domo Tactical Communications, a drone manufacturer in my constituency, which I've raised in written questions before. Could he tell me if he will uphold the visit that was due to take place by his predecessor before the reshuffle to visit them in my constituency? And can I also ask what proportion of drones purchased for the UK Armed Forces are procured from UK-based drone manufacturers, and what can be done to increase that proportion?
So I'd like to thank the honourable member for his question. I've been reassured that the Min Dry will visit your factory in your constituency to come and have a look at it. But from my perspective, we've increased our production of drones for Ukraine up to 100,000 this year alone, and we're increasing the procurement of drones into the British military by thousands.
Anna Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud that the government has supported Ukraine through the provision of drones. I recently visited radio designer company in Saltaire in my constituency, who are at the cutting edge of radio frequency, which is essential to fighting the rapidly developing threat from drones. So can the Minister assure me that procurement processes are agile enough to allow innovative smaller businesses like this with specialist technologies in radio frequency to access new defence contracts, helping us deliver on the Strategic Defence Review?
I'd like to thank the honourable friend for her question. Mr Speaker, it's not lost on anyone in the House that the first 100 pages of the Strategic Defence Review were all on industry and ensuring SMEs can dock into the defence enterprise far more effectively and ensure start procuring weapons and systems not only for our defence but for our overseas partners. And she will also be aware that we've in 2024 we procured 10,000 drones, and that's gone up to 100,000 now going into Ukraine to support our allies in their fight against Russia.
Dr. Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have all witnessed the devastating effect of mass drone attacks. And MPs in Parliament could see for themselves the sinister-looking Iranian-Russian drone that was here only last week. So what measures is the Ministry taking to develop a strategy in this country to defend ourselves from such a mass drone attack?
I'd like to, Mr Speaker, recall when the Queen Elizabeth set sail several years ago, a quadcopter landed on their deck, and investment on taking out, in particular, uncrewed air systems since then has been relatively limited. Within the Strategic Defence Review, we have pledged £1 billion to integrated air defence here in the UK, and you'll see many procurements moving forward in a defence investment plan.
So, Secretary of State James Scott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. By their own written answer, the government said that they only ordered 3 drones for the British Armed Forces in their first financial year. So at June's defence orals, I suggested where Labour could find the money to buy drones at the scale we need by scrapping their crazy Chagos deal. Now, they rejected my proposal then. But given that the Secretary of State has just failed to deny £2.6 billion of cuts at the MOD this year, isn't it even more urgent that they scrap their crazy £35 billion surrender and spend every penny on the uncrewed revolution for our own armed forces?
Mr Speaker, the irony. They started this deal. They processed the deal, Labour came into government and we finished it and we put it into place, supported by our allies, both the US and multiple others. Mr Speaker, not only did we finish that deal, we started and finished an India deal, a US deal, a Europe deal, a Typhoon deal, a Norway deal and a Germany deal.
Lawrence Turner.
That's number 8, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr Speaker, I'd like to answer question 8 and 10 together. Defence is an engine for growth. The Defence Industrial Strategy that we published in September sets out how we will reform procurement, cut contracting time, spend more of a rising defence budget with British companies, invest in frontier technologies and skills, crowd in private capital and support regional development.
Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to draw attention to my declaration and register interest in respect of the GMB Defence Manufacturing Trade Union. Defence is an engine for growth, but skill shortages remain. What steps have been taken to increase the number of high-quality apprentices? And if I may, Mr Speaker, will he join me in congratulating my constituent, Andy de Comyn, whose design has just been chosen for the proposed national memorial to all members of the parliamentary community who have fallen in conflict?
Well, can I thank my friend for his question? Can I join him in thanking his constituent for his creativity and work? Defence is one of the largest apprentice employers in the country with over 24,000 apprenticeships. The Navy is number 2, the RAF is number 4, and I'm proud that the Army has been named the number 1 apprenticeship employer. We're doing even more than that with £182 million going into skills, and we're working with our trade union colleagues as part of the Defence Industrial Joint Council, both the GMB that I'm proud to be a member of and our colleagues in Unite as well, alongside industries big and small, so we can motor our economic development and create more jobs in defence.
Southern James.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I ask the Minister how the defence sector can make better use of underutilised MOD land and assets to contribute to innovative models of business like community energy projects, which alongside initiatives like the South Yorkshire Growth Deal can contribute to local SMEs and energy security?
As a very proud Labour and cooperative MP, I know just how important we can use community energy to create good renewable energy, cut energy bills as well. Be very happy speaking to her more about this. But we are looking at the 1% of Britain that we own as a department to look at how we can not only deliver defence outputs, build more houses with 100,000 houses identified in the Defence Housing Strategy, as well as supporting environmental output and greater industrial opportunities for the private sector as well. Very happy meeting her to discuss further.
Speaker, the Minister rightly promotes our world-class maritime sector in the South West. Considerable private investment is being made, including a new resilience factory opening in my constituency next week. Such innovative young companies live or die on the pace of government contracting, but we continue to wait for the latest defence investment plan. So how will the Minister reassure the new tech companies in my South West Devon constituency that the pace of their private investments are matched by the urgency of MOD contracting to ensure that economic growth through defence becomes a reality?
Well, can I thank my constituency neighbour for raising issues in the South West? I'm actually opening the factory in her constituency next week, and I look forward to seeing her there to make the case further forward. The Defence Investment Plan will be published later this year. That will set out what we are spending our money on. Let's be very clear. We are delivering the Strategic Defence Review. We're piling more of that energy and that money that we've been allocated from the Treasury into British businesses. I want to see more SMEs benefit from that, and in that respect, the Defence Industrial Strategy we're delivering at pace, but very happy discussing further with her.
Sir Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The South West, as the Minister has already confirmed, is home to major military assets, and the defence sector supports over 60,000 jobs in the region, including many in Glastonbury and Somerton. The area is uniquely positioned to drive forward the government's industrial strategy ambitions. So what action is the Minister taking to ensure the defence industry is an engine of economic growth in Somerset?
Well, can I thank her for raising the opportunities in the South West? There's a huge amount of a skilled workforce in the South West region, a huge amount of economic activity already present, but we want there to be even more. That's why we're working with local government, regional government where it exists across the South West, as well as our colleagues in the private sector to look at how we can boost skills, direct more of that rising defence budget at British companies in the South West and every other region and nation of the country, so we can deliver for defence and create more jobs as well.
Steph Ackerell.
Question number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the UK and its allies must be ready to deal with the most demanding of circumstances, deterring and preventing a full-scale war by being combat ready. But I can assure the honourable member that low-flying training plays an indispensable role in achieving and maintaining our warfighting capability, and it is spread throughout the whole of the UK to help minimise disturbance to the public.
Steph Ackerell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dozens of my constituents have contacted me to express their frustration with the training patterns of both RAF and American fighter jets over North Norfolk's towns and villages. It makes it hard to work, traumatises pets, and in the case of one of my constituents, has left them with permanent hearing damage. They and I recognise the importance of training, but carrying out continuous manoeuvres over populated areas when we're so near to the North Sea baffles them. Can he assure me that he will review the training patterns in our area and take steps to reduce the impact on my residents?
I can assure the honourable member that those increased training missions are to support an increased deployment across Europe, highlighting the issues. But I will meet with the Minister to talk through those issues and see if we can make some slight changes.
Danny Beales.
Number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, welcome.
As announced in the Strategic Defence Review, we're working to deliver a 30% expansion of in-school and community-based cadet forces by 2030. The campaign is backed by £70 million of new investment that would increase our cadets by an estimated 40,000 across the UK, providing the opportunity for many more young people to enjoy the fantastic benefits of the cadet experience.
Danny Beales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently had the honour of visiting the RAF Air Cadets in Uxbridge, and they showed me firsthand the amazing experiences that the cadets offer to young people. As well as being a route into the armed forces, they learned new STEM subjects, got to travel the UK, getting a Duke of Edinburgh award, as well as some picking up a musical instrument for the first time. This is why it's vital that we expand the cadets through the 30 by 30 initiative. I'd like to ask the Minister, to enable this to take place, what consideration has been given of how we enable more people to volunteer to run cadet forces and also to access funding to expand their facilities?
I'm delighted to hear of the fantastic opportunities that the Air Cadets are having in his constituency. I'd like to assure him that delivering the 30 by 30 expansion programme requires a detailed assessment of key foundational areas, which does include cadet growth, including the adult volunteer proposition and the cadet estate. Planning for this is underway to ensure that our activities yield maximum gain, that the fantastic benefits of the cadets experience are available to more young people across the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Northern Ireland University Air Squadron is based in Aldergrove in my constituency. Can the Minister give the reassurance that any support for cadets is also expanded to every cadet and every base across the UK?
I thank the honourable member for his question, and as a big proponent of the cadets, I can assure him that we'll make sure that all the benefits of the cadets are available across the country.
Lee Anderson.
13, please, sir.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question. We have been very clear in the Strategic Defence Review that we are committed to growing the Army. Under this government, we have driven improvements to the recruiting process, stripping out outdated medical policies, reducing the time it takes to receive candidate medical records, and widening cross-government data sharing. The Army is now sending conditional offers of employment in 10 days and provisional training start dates to eligible candidates within 30 days. These measures, along with targeted recruiting and a restructure of the Army's recruiting organisation, are delivering results. Year on year, the Army's soldier intake numbers are up by 13% and officer numbers are up by 10%.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I share the Minister's concerns over Army recruitment, but could she please explain to me why a young person would even consider a job in the armed forces if in 50 years' time they may get a knock on the door to be charged with an offence when they were simply doing their duty?
I would like to reassure the honourable member that serving in the armed forces is a fantastic career for any young person. The experiences and the skills that one can gain from a career are second to none. I, for one, am deeply grateful for all of the opportunities that I had when I served. I would urge everybody in the young person to consider a career in the armed forces. And I can assure him that this government is committed to renewing the contract with those who served. As a veteran myself, I can assure you that our #1 priority is to defend and protect those who serve this nation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I take this opportunity to thank you for the remembrance service that we had this morning. It was hugely emotional for me, and it made me think about the members from my constituency of Harlow who gave their lives for our freedom 80 years ago. Can I ask the Minister what she will do, and my gallant friend, I should say, what she will do to continue to champion servicemen and women who continue to protect this country, and we should celebrate all of them, no matter their ethnicity, their religion, or in fact, their nationality.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and he is absolutely right that we must celebrate everybody that contributes to our armed forces, no matter their gender or other protected characteristics. The commitment of this government is total to protecting and serving those who serve this nation.
Mark Francois, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As General Lord Dannett, the former Chief of the General Staff, said at the weekend, if potential recruits to the armed forces do not believe that their government will stand by them when performing their duties in a lawful manner, why risk joining at all? He was speaking regarding Labour's proposed Troubles Bill, which could see Northern Ireland veterans, without whom there would never have been any Good Friday Agreement in the first place, in the dock again by next year. So this minister called opponents of this naive. So what is her response to the former head of the British Army and the brave soldiers he led? Were they all naive too?
Seeing as the honourable member is attacking me for something that I didn't say, I can only assume that he cannot attack me. He is very welcome to check Hansard, where he will see that I was very specifically referring to people spreading misinformation. You can see it there in black and white in Hansard. It is in Hansard. It is in Hansard, absolutely, and I urge the honourable member to maybe reread it, and he will see the full quote.
Can he read?
This government is committed to protecting those who serve. Our first and foremost priority is to ensure the welfare and protect those who have served, just as we have done for many people who have served in armed forces across multiple conflicts. I can only say again, this commitment of this government to our veterans is total.
Paul Francois.
But, sir, the former Labour Security Minister, Lord West, said just recently we shouldn't be doing this.
Exactly.
Lord Glassman, the founder of Blue Labour, said we must reverse it as soon as possible. And the honourable member for Blackley and Middleton said to continue this against one side made no sense. So with the Labour rebellion clearly already brewing, and given that many Northern Ireland veterans were initially recruited from red wall seats, why are Labour ministers seriously insisting on driving their backbenchers into the division lobbies just to do Sinn Féin and their old comrades in the IRA a favour? Why?
I would just urge the honourable member to remember the really serious issues that are at stake here. The priorities of this government, as we have already shown repeatedly, are to do right by the families of over 200 British service personnel who were murdered in Northern Ireland, to ensure that we have protections and appropriate measures in place to defend our veterans. We have 5 protections in law and a 6th that we have control over ourselves. I can assure the member again that our commitment to veterans of this government is total.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Al Pinkerton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I begin by associating myself and my party with the sentiments reflected by the Secretary of State about the terrible events in Huntingdon at the weekend. The Secretary of State's ambition to reverse the outflows from our armed forces is absolutely right, particularly considering given the damage the last government did to our military. But it's far from clear that the government is moving forward enough to achieve the necessary changes. There continues to be more service personnel leaving the army year on year than there are those joining. In order to strengthen our defence, we need to give more people better incentives to join the armed forces. Will the Minister considering accelerating recruitment properly and tackling outflow rates by backing the Liberal Democrat proposals for a £10,000 signing bonus to attract new recruits?
I thank the honourable member for his question. In addition to some of the measures already outlined to speed up recruitment, we are looking at expanding new and novel ways of entry into the armed forces, for example, such as direct entry in the cyber stream. We are hugely focused on retention, and this is a very personal mission for me, having left the forces in 2020, being able to, the experience that I had of some of the measures that might have helped retain me for longer in my service. I'm utterly dedicated to ensuring that we can start to fix some of the reasons that people give for leaving, not least the multi-billion-pound investment in fixing forces housing.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 15, please.
Minister.
Thank the honourable member for their question. As an army veteran, indeed a female army veteran, this mission is deeply personal to me, and more work has to be done to improve service life for women in our armed forces. The 2 remaining recommendations from the committee report, the launch of the Veteran Strategy and the publication of the Tri-Service Sexual Harassment Survey results, will be completed this month. The report was a very useful catalyst on holding the MOD to account on many initiatives through the Raising Our Standards programme.
Charlotte Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her reply. Our servicewomen urgently need investment in female-specific tactical equipment, particularly bras and body armour. What steps is the Minister taking to provide funding for research, development and implementation of kit around the female anatomy, and to ensure fitting services and task-appropriate provision are standard across the forces?
The honourable member makes a good point, and indeed as someone who had to wear the body armour, I'm fully on board with her point. Progress is currently underway to address the very points that she mentions.
Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Royal Artillery Gunner J.C. Beck committed suicide after being sexually assaulted and failed by the military. Can the Minister explain what's being done to ensure that women serving in our armed forces are protected from abuse and that complaints are handled with independence, compassion and seriousness they deserve?
The honourable member raises a very, very important case, and like I'm sure everybody in this House, reading the report into Daisy Louise's death was a hugely tragic and deeply saddening case. It is a duty on me that I feel very deeply to make sure that we are doing everything we can to address some of the behaviours that she mentioned. Not least the Raising Our Standards programme, which is addressing our cultural behaviours to strengthen leadership and make sure that when complaints like this are made, they are dealt with appropriately. We're also establishing, as she knows, the Armed Forces Commissioner to make sure that where any investigation into these kind of behaviours is taken out, we can have full trust in the service to do right by any service personnel, whether the lowest ranks or the highest.
Comes to Huddersfield, Bristol.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
So State.
Last week, Mr. Speaker, I was in Turkey with the Prime Minister to sign Britain's biggest fighter jet export deal in a generation. The £8 billion contract for 20 Typhoons is a win for European security, a win for the British economy and a win for 20,000 UK workers. It follows just weeks after we won the biggest ever warship deal, the £10 billion contract with Norway, securing 4,000 jobs over the next decade. Mr. Speaker, these deals demonstrate defence as an engine for growth, and today we go further. We publish our defence housing strategy, our plan to upgrade 40,000 Forces family homes, a plan to build 100,000 new homes for military and civilians alike, a plan backed by £9 billion in investment over this decade, more than double that in the Tory plans. Mr. Speaker, this is a government delivering for defence and delivering for Britain.
Mr. Speaker, may I congratulate the Secretary of State on the Turkey deal last week. Now, a year on from the signing by the Secretary of State of the Trinity House Agreement with his German counterpart, is the Minister able to outline what progress has been made in implementing that deal, in particular around boosting industrial collaboration and driving greater investment into integrated air and missile defence?
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, a year on from that Trinity House Agreement, our cooperation over the next year will only deepen further. Within weeks, we will have German P-8s flying out of Lossiemouth. We have a new cyber programme to conduct joint activities. We have accelerated work on a new 2,000-kilometre deep precision strike missile and a new £200 million bridging deal to support the British Army. This is an agreement, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, which is more important now than when we signed it a year ago.
Sir Secretary of State James Gosling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In his SDR statement to Parliament on 2nd of June, the Secretary of State said that the Defence Investment Plan would be, and I quote, completed and published in the autumn. Will he keep that promise?
Well, the SDR quite rightly said, Mr. Speaker, that further decisions on investment plans were central to delivering the SDR. We're doing that work thoroughly at the moment, so that we will no longer have what his government left, a defence programme which was overcommitted, underfunded and unsuited to meet the threats that face us.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he didn't answer the question, and I'm afraid the worry is it's yet another delayed defence command paper, which prompts the obvious question: what exactly are they delivering for defence except delayed defence command papers? I mean, Mr. Speaker, isn't this the truth? They're putting the British Army back in the dock. They're surrendering Diego Garcia for £35 billion, and all the while, as they have not denied today, cutting £2.6 billion from the front line this year. Don't the men and women of our armed forces deserve better?
Mr. Speaker, his figures are wrong. His characterisation and description is wrong. We put a £5 billion extra into the defence budget in this, our first year, and we're raising defence investment to the highest increase since the Cold War. But the public expect us to manage better the budgets that we've got, so we're managing those budgets in the way that he failed to do. And alongside the Strategic Defence Review, alongside the Defence Investment Plan, we're already acting. We're acting and have let over 1,000 major contracts, 84% to British firms, and today we're putting £9 billion into defence housing for the future.
Mr. Speaker, Welwyn Lammy in Brierley Hill in my constituency design, build and manufacture davits for marine applications, and they employ around 45 local people using local supply chains for their products, and they're really keen to win a government contract, but sadly they lost out under the previous government to a Spanish cruise ship company. What is the Minister doing to support British defence businesses, and will he visit Welwyn Lammy with me to help them work with the government further?
Can I thank her for a question? We want to direct more of our increasing defence budget at British companies, including SMEs. I'd be very happy meeting her to see how we can encourage her business to win more defence contracts and to feed back on why we can be better in allowing SMEs to access that defence funding that we provide.
Callum Miller, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Speaker, we've already heard about the sentencing last week of Warrant Officer Michael Webber for the sexual assault of gunner Jaisley Beck. And I'm sure all who heard them were deeply moved by the dignified words of Jaisley's parents, as they described how that abuse and the failure to address it contributed to her death 5 months later. So can the Minister of Veterans and People, whose personal commitment the House on the implementation in full of the recommendation of the Atherton report, and specifically providing access to civilian courts for sexual abuse offences?
Thank the honourable member for his question. So, as he will be aware, Defence accepted 33 of the committee's recommendations, partially accepted a further 4 recommendations and noted 13 points which were conclusions rather than recommendations. There were 3 recommendations we are not implementing, but it must be stressed we are instead taking action to address the underlying concerns of the recommendations in other ways. The remaining 33 recommendations have been addressed through both defence and single service activity delivered over the past 2 years.
Bruce Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The opening last week by the King of the UK's first national memorial commemorating LGBT veterans marks an important moment for all those LGBT people who have served or continue to serve in our military. So can my honourable friend confirm that this is not going to be just merely a symbolic moment for those veterans, and can we put on record my thanks to LGBT personnel, both who have served and continue to serve with distinction?
I thank the honourable member for his question. It was without a doubt a huge honour and a privilege to attend the unveiling of the Everton Memorial, as well as attending the memorial to the late Lord Everton, commemorating his life and legacy last week. We have paid £20 million now in total to veterans under the LGBT financial recognition scheme, and I can assure him that the monument stands to me not only as a memorial of what has gone before, but a firm anchor of where we must go going forwards.
Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I warmly welcome, as do the families of 40 Commando and Taunton, the government's adoption of the decent home standard proposed from these benches and the £9 billion investment, which is also warmly welcome. Can the Minister give an indication of the timescale within which all service family accommodation will be brought up to that decent home standard?
So the scale of this problem is truly gigantic. We've rebought the 36,000 homes. 9 out of every 10 homes will be refurbished, and 14,000 homes potentially completely rebuilt. We've already started in the first 1,000 which need modernising, and once that's done, we'll move on to the next.
Lorraine Beavers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Across our country, service leavers like Brady, a 29-year-old from my constituency, are experiencing homelessness and addiction before receiving the support they need. I welcome the government's work on the renewed Armed Forces Covenant, but does the Minister agree that a structured and timely health and welfare checks following discharge would strengthen that promise to veterans like Brady?
Minister.
Thank the honourable member for her question. We do have significant processes in place before exit to ensure a smooth transition, particularly those to manage personnel who are wounded, injured or sick. And the Valet initiative should help us take steps to better coordinate support for veterans. I'd like to assure the honourable member that improving how service personnel leave the services is a key priority for me.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A really simple question. Does this government consider China a national security threat?
Mr. Speaker, no one word can sum up a country as significant and as complex as China, but our experience tells us that China is certainly an economic threat as well as an opportunity in many areas.
Mr. Speaker, research shows women in the army are up to 7 times more likely than men to suffer musculoskeletal injuries and 10 times more likely to experience hip and pelvic fractures. Given these stark disparities, can the Minister tell the House what steps she has taken to ensure that women veterans receive appropriate gender-specific healthcare and rehabilitation support as they transition into civilian life?
Thank the honourable member for her question. She's absolutely right to highlight the particular struggles faced by female service leavers, and I'd like to assure her through Op Restore there is specific pathways for veterans who need specific musculoskeletal, for example, support.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to media reports, the Secretary of State recently revealed in a speech that the UK had deployed troops to Israel to monitor the ceasefire in Gaza. Could you take this opportunity to update the House on the number and activities of any troops deployed there?
The honourable gentleman is not correct in saying that they're there to monitor the ceasefire. We have a small handful of British Forces personnel deployed to the civil and military coordination centre at the request of the US, and it's the US that is leading that work.
Johnny Reid.
Thank you.
Mr Speaker. Recent reports that Babcock is having to recruit overseas welders, hundreds of them, because of a skill shortage in Scotland, is the direct result of decades of underinvestment in further education and skills in Scotland. Can the Minister outline what the UK Government can do to make sure that my constituents can access the apprenticeships and skills that defence jobs depend on?
She's absolutely right. If we had a Scottish Government that was investing in defence skills, rather than a Scottish Government that dithers on defence, a Scottish Government that didn't invest in the welding centre in Glasgow, that required a Labour government in the UK to step in and invest, we're delivering for defence. The Scottish Government are dithering on defence, and they're letting jobs slip out of their hands as a result.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I've been campaigning since shortly after I was elected for service family accommodation, and so I welcome the Government's commitment to improving that over the last few weeks. But single living accommodation continues to be a considerable concern, with recent reports in my constituency of rat infestations at RAF Shawbury. I wonder what the Government is going to be doing to improve single living accommodation, which is equally important as service family accommodation.
I thank the honourable member for raising a very important point. We are shortly to be getting underway with our single living accommodation review to address exactly these points, both the sometimes shocking state of single living accommodation and what we can do to support those who live in that type of accommodation.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mid and South Pembrokeshire has a proud military history, and the defence sector continues to thrive at sites like Castle Martin and Caldwell Barracks. So does the Minister agree that the Defence Growth Fund should be used to bring direct benefits to communities like mine, as well as strengthen our national security?
There's a real opportunity in Pembrokeshire and across Wales as we implement the Defence Growth Deal for Wales to create more good, well-paid, unionised jobs that provide great opportunities. Meeting him to work out how we can advance those, creating more decent jobs across Wales.
Mr Speaker, last month the SNP government in Edinburgh released their latest independence propaganda paper. Unbelievably, it said that nuclear weapons would have no place in an independent Scotland. Does the Minister agree with me that Scottish independence would be a gift to Britain's enemies and would put at risk our hard work of our armed forces keeping us safe at home?
The honourable gentleman is right. The continuation of a Scottish nationalist government in Scotland is a threat to our security. It's a threat to the future prosperity and jobs in that country.
Chair of the Select Committee, Tansing Dessy.
Speaker, given the multitude of security threats we face, especially in the grey zone with cyber attacks, it's abundantly clear that we need to accelerate investment in defence, but the government is just not able to move fast enough. Now, our German friends, renowned for their fiscal prudence, have relaxed their fiscal rules just for the Defence Department. So in the run-up to the budget, what discussions has my right honourable friend, the Defence Secretary, had with the Chancellor to relax fiscal rules just for the Ministry of Defence in order to meet the moment?
Mr Speaker, we have the increase in budget this year. We have the increase in the budget over the Parliament. Our job now is to ensure that we can deliver value for money for that increased investment and use that increased investment to drive economic growth across the UK, and it's because of that increased investment we've been able to announce and launch our defence housing strategy today.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Several of my veteran constituents have contacted me about very long delays in compensation payments under the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme. Mr Butler, who lives near Wareham, has two separate claims, one for hearing loss and one for an arm injury, and he's now waited more than 2 years for an outcome. And as we look towards Remembrance Sunday and reflect on the sacrifices made, what steps is the Department taking to ensure that we pay our debts to those who have served us more recently?
I thank the honourable member for raising this case of her constituent. If she would write to me with the exact details, I will look into the exact reason why it has taken this long.
Emma Lewell.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. North East industry has always supported our nation's defence, yet we now have the lowest MOD spend out of every single region, leaving our potential untapped. Will my honourable friend please meet with me in the North East Regional Defence and Security Cluster to redress this?
Yes, very happy to. I'm meeting North East colleagues about how we can drive more jobs and opportunity. And as we look at establishing not just defence growth zones, but defence technical excellence colleges and the 6 new munitions and energetics factories, there's a strong case for the North East receiving some of that defence investment.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now that the Secretary of State's warmed up a bit with calling the SNP a threat to our national security, can he have another go and say whether China is a threat to our national security?
I have nothing to add to what I said to the honourable gentleman from Ashfield earlier on when I answered his question, which was the same as the honourable gentleman's. What a waste of a question.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much welcome the Government's Op Valor pilot programme and the Minister's commitment to improving support for our veterans. However, Mr. Speaker, as home of the Royal Navy and one of the largest veteran communities, I'm disappointed that Portsmouth City Council is not part of it. Can the Minister reassure me that councils like Portsmouth will be encouraged and supported to join Valor and really look after the veterans that live in our city?
Thank the honourable member for her question. I too share her disappointment. Valor is a £50 million programme that will bring together a network of regional hubs to make sure that there is a physical location that veterans can go and seek help. And I would urge every region of the UK to get involved.
Sarah Bull.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. EKA Limited in my constituency supplies to the MOD service recovery vehicles that have to be deployed with our tanks. But an issue that they and other service personnel have highlighted is the absence of robust spare parts provisions in the event of a breakdown or damage. The government is spending millions on these assets and leaving these completely unprotected. So is the MOD reviewing the provisions of spares as part of its procurement? And would the Minister meet with me and EKA to discuss this further?
Yeah, happy meeting the honourable lady to discuss this further. The last government, I'm afraid, left not only our weapons stockpiles almost empty, but also far too much of our parts stockpiles as well. So that's why we're looking at investing in that as part of our defence investment plan. But happy meeting her to discuss it further.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 2 giants of the Labour and anti-nuclear arms movement would have been 100 this year, Tony Benn and Mick McGahey. I never had the pleasure of meeting either, but I think they would have recognised that an industrial strategy based in militarism is flawed. The defence sector is less than 1% of the UK workforce, so militarism is not a UK-wide industry, and it serves war, not peace. What happened to choosing welfare over warfare, of choosing jobs in sectors that will promote real economic growth and actual social benefit?
When I bring him in on the topic, it's meant to be short and punchy, not a war and peace question.
Well, I have to say my honourable friend is wrong on this. There are over 400,000 jobs directly supported and indirectly supported by defence. And the defence investment that we make into this country is almost 70% outside London and the South East, right across the UK.
Mr. Speaker, people's experiences of medical discharge from the armed forces vary significantly, and too often it fails those who need the support the most. So what steps is the Minister taking to improve the discharge process, including improving consistency across units?
Thank the honourable member for raising a very important point. Making sure that service personnel who leave under the medical discharge are fully set up for success in their post-service life is fundamental and a huge priority for me.
Dave Robertson.
Last week I had the honour and privilege of attending the dedication of the new LGBT+ Armed Forces Community Memorial at the National Memorial Arboretum in Albury was in my constituency, alongside His Majesty the King, proud veterans and members of our armed forces. Will the Ministers join me in commending the unveiling of this important memorial, and do they agree that it will serve as a lasting reminder of the injustice and discrimination suffered by LGBT+ service personnel, and as a powerful symbol of our commitment to equality and respect for all those who serve?
I thank the honourable member for this question. It was very clear to see how much that event meant to the LGBT+ veterans, many of whom had suffered terribly under the ban, and many said to me that they never thought that this day would come. I hope that the event itself and the memorial will serve as a lasting reminder to our responsibilities going forwards.
Final question, John Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The F-35 Lightning II aircraft is a cutting-edge system, the helmets for which come from my constituency in Dumfries and Galloway. But the Public Accounts Committee has the MOD in missile lock over the cost of introducing the new nuclear freefall bombs with the F-35A. Can the Minister give us some reassurance to the House today that the decision to bring in tactical nuclear weapons is not going to cost us a bomb?
Yes.
Right, we'll let the front bench change over. Before we begin, it may be helpful to remind the House that the trial of Soldier F in relation to the events on Bloody Sunday is no longer sub judice, and that it is a focus of today's urgent question. There remain live cases in respect of other soldiers. I previously granted a waiver on the 14th of July 2025 to allow limited reference to active legal proceedings related to historic troubles-related deaths. However, references to live cases should be limited to the context and to the events which led to the cases, but not to the detail of cases themselves, nor the names of those individuals involved. I now call Alex Burkhardt, Shadow Secretary of State, for his urgent question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To ask the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland if he will make a statement on the verdict in the trial of Soldier F.
Secretary of State.
I thank the honourable member for his question. The trial of Soldier F concluded on the 23rd of October with a not guilty verdict. The Ministry of Defence rightly provided him with legal and pastoral support. I and the Secretary of State for Defence have of course noted the judgment, but I do not think it appropriate to be drawn on the particulars of these independent legal proceedings. The House will recognise that it was also a difficult day for the families of the 13 people shot dead on Bloody Sunday in circumstances that the former Prime Minister, Lord Cameron, described as, and I quote, unjustified and unjustifiable. I'm sure the sympathies of the whole House remain with them. We all understand the continuing pain felt by families and communities in Northern Ireland and across the United Kingdom as a result of the Troubles. And the Government remains committed to establishing a legacy process which can provide answers for families who are still seeking to find out what happened to their loved ones. We will also always remember the dangers faced by our brave soldiers, police and others who served during the time of Operation Banner and tried to keep people safe, while always remembering, especially at this time of year, the ultimate sacrifice made by those who gave their lives in doing so. Their service will never be forgotten, and we owe them a profound debt of gratitude. It is, however, Mr. Speaker, important to note that the Soldier F case, of course, involved no role for either this government or the last one. These were independent proceedings which were ongoing before the Legacy Act 2023, and they were not halted by that legislation. Mr. Speaker, decisions by the Prosecution Service in Northern Ireland are always taken independently in light of the individual facts and circumstances, and we should all respect that independence. A prosecution can only ever be brought when the evidence presents, in the view of prosecutors, a reasonable prospect of the conviction and where it is in the public interest to proceed. I also recognise that all those affected by the Troubles, including veterans, want a system that is fair, balanced and proportionate. That is what the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill is seeking to put in place, with a new Legacy Commission and strong protections for veterans which were not included in the last government's Legacy Act, which offered a false and undeliverable promise on immunity to our Northern Ireland veterans. These measures will provide what the 3 UK Veterans Commissioners have called for: not immunity from the law, but fairness under it.
Thank you for granting this urgent question, Mr. Speaker. I too want to begin with a thought for the families left bereft by the events of that day in 1972. It was a Conservative Prime Minister who 15 years ago said to this House, "What happened on Bloody Sunday was both unjustified and wrong. On behalf of our country, I'm deeply sorry." He did so, of course, after the publication of the Savile inquiry, which took 12 years and cost in today's money about £325 million. What is pertinent now is that even after such an extensive inquiry, there has been no conviction. Indeed, Judge Patrick Lynch told Belfast Crown Court that the evidence fell well short of the standard required. He said, "A 53-year-old statement cannot be cross-examined, nor can I assess the demeanour of a sheet of A4 paper." This goes to the heart of what my party argued when passing our Legacy Act.
Exactly. Well,
as time goes by, it becomes vanishingly difficult to obtain convictions. The 1998 agreement was 27 years ago, the ceasefires 31 years ago. And this, of course, has implications for the government's Troubles Bill, which will reopen many such cases, cases where there are no prospect of resolution, but only of ongoing legal process, with almost no possibility of bringing terrorists to court, but which ultimately leave open the likelihood of ever more vexatious complaints against our veterans. Claims like that thrown out by the High Court in Belfast last month, in which the judge described the challenge as utterly divorced from reality, but not before a former Special Forces soldier had to endure 4 years of investigation. Last week it was reported that a similar case from 53 years ago may soon go on trial. No wonder that on Friday SAS veterans had a letter in the Financial Times in which they said that legacy has become an industry that keeps wounds open while rewriting history. So we ask the Secretary of State to think again.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm grateful to the honourable member for that, and the fact that he referred to the Savile inquiry, because it was, of course, that long-running inquiry that finally brought, in the eyes of the families of the 13 people shot dead, some truth and some justice, in which led the former Prime Minister to make his apology. He is absolutely right when he says that with the passage of time, I think the phrase he used was, it is vanishingly difficult to obtain convictions, and most of the families, not all, but most of the families that I have met who lost loved ones recognise that fact. But he also has to acknowledge that the Legacy Act, with its offer of immunity in return for statements that the Legacy Commission regarded as truthful and credible, which could have given immunity to terrorists. And that is why the immunity that the last government sought to put in place was rejected by victims and survivors groups in Northern Ireland, was opposed by all of the political parties in Northern Ireland, and was found by the courts to be incompatible with our human rights obligations. And therefore, as I've said to the House before, and I've said to him, it was no basis for trying to help those families to find the answers that they are looking for. That is why we need a different approach, building, I grant him, on the establishment of the Legacy Commission, because I took the decision that we would not abolish it, but reform it. That is what the bill that we will debate shortly seeks to do, and I look forward to it being scrutinised by the House.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Many people impacted by the Troubles continue to live with the pain, trauma and grief of war. Now, the previous government's approach to legacy was rendered essentially useless because, as the Secretary of State just said, it was opposed by all the political parties in Northern Ireland. So can I ask the Secretary of State what steps he's taken to carry all the people of Northern Ireland with him and his approach to legacy?
Well, having promised the House of Commons in two statements since the government was elected in July 2024 that I would bring forward proposals, I did so when the government published the bill on the 14th of October. Since then, I have met political parties, I have met victims and survivors organisations representing victims and survivors. I will be meeting the Victims and Survivors Forum that I met the day that the agreement with the Irish government was published. I will be meeting them again this week. I would say that, as I acknowledged to the House when I made my oral statement, any proposals that are put forward are not going to be greeted with approval by everyone. But I have been much struck by the fact that those I have met and talked to have said, well, we will need to consider the detail. I believe that it provides a basis for moving forward, and I hope the House will recognise that too.
Dr. Alpington, Liberal Democrat, Spurs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for his responses so far. We welcome the resolution of this trial and the clarity that the law has afforded, and in doing so also extend our deepest sympathies to the families who still seek justice and answers. The 2023 Legacy Act may have been driven by the instinct to protect veterans. However, it failed to comply with our international legal obligations and, through its conditional immunity, created a false equivalence between those who valiantly served in the British Armed Forces and those involved in acts of terrorism. That approach was both morally wrong and offensive to veterans and victims alike. The violence carried out by terrorist organisations during the Troubles caused deep suffering across Northern Ireland, and we believe that upholding the rule of law must apply to all without exception, but that prosecution should never become persecution. This case focuses our attention back on the government's new deal, with a new attempt to deal with the legacy of the past. Is the Secretary of State absolutely confident that the bill will deliver strong enough protections for British veterans? What has he done to try and secure support from veterans' organisations? And what has he done to ensure that victims and families can finally access the truth and justice that they deserve?
Well, I agree with what the Honourable Gentleman said, the characterisation he made of the immunity provisions in the Legacy Act. I would quote to him what Nick Pope, the chair of the Confederation of Service Charities, said. He said, as the Confederation of Service Charities, we welcome, and I quote, the development of the safeguards that have been put in place to offer protection to those within the armed forces community who are affected by legacy issues. We drew them up having spoken to veterans, and I hope that when people look at them and see how they will work, they will recognise that we have acknowledged the particular responsibility we have to veterans to treat them fairly in the process, and that is the right way to proceed.
Trina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 53 years after the events of Bloody Sunday, 15 years after the report of the Savile inquiry, it's becoming clear that the prospect of future criminal cases is few and far between. But those families who've lost loved ones, whether they be the families of military personnel, or those who were simply in the wrong families of those who were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time on a particular day, sits with those people every single day and affects every day of their lives. What assurances can the Secretary of State give me that they remain part absolutely at the centre of work going forward?
Well, those families, all those families, including military families, are at the centre of what we are seeking to do. What is the government trying to achieve? To create a legacy system which more people in Northern Ireland can have confidence in. The last Legacy Act failed to command sufficient confidence on the part of the people in Northern Ireland. That is a fact that no one can dispute. And we want to put in place arrangements that even where, and I agree with my honourable friend, prosecution is not possible, they are increasingly unlikely with the passage of time. I think the judgment in the case of Soldier F made that extremely clear in the judge's summing up. But to be able to provide information about what happened to those families.
Out of the House, Edward Lee.
Well, whatever the wrongs committed on that day, does the Secretary of State understand that it just beggars belief that a former IRI man can be, in his old age, lolling on a sofa now, despite all his torturings, kneecappings, executions? I'm thinking of Captain Naurak, abducted, tortured, killed, his perpetrators never brought to justice. Does he realise that this whole process is deeply wounding to the morale of the British Army? He can take refuge in independent prosecution, but he can give his own opinion, and he can say, surely it's time now that Northern Ireland moved on into a better age.
Well, we all want Northern Ireland to be able to move on to a better age and a better future. But we have a responsibility to those families who are still searching for answers to put in place a system that will help them to get those answers, including in cases that he has mentioned. I would simply point out to him that it is estimated that between 25 and 35,000 paramilitaries served sentences of imprisonment during the Trouble for a wide variety of offences, including murder. And if he looks at the cases that are currently awaiting trial, he will find that most of them relate to former paramilitaries and not to our armed forces.
Jane Kirkham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's remarks in his statement about the professionalism, bravery and sacrifice of our armed forces and the role they played in Northern Ireland and across the UK. What discussions has he had with veterans, as well as the Defence Secretary and Veterans Minister, about the new Protection in the Troubles Bill? And would the Secretary of State or one of the Defence Ministers be prepared to speak to veterans in Cornwall on this matter?
Well, I'm sure that my honourable friends who are ministers in the Ministry of Defence will have heard what my honourable friend has to say. The protections that have been brought before the House in the legislation are the result of extensive discussions with the Secretary of State for Defence, with the Armed Forces Ministers and with veterans' organisations.
Sir David Davis.
Thank you, Speaker. The front bench has quite rightly referred to the pain of the relatives of those who died on Bloody Sunday, and we all share in their sympathy in that. But nothing justifies the persecution of innocent people, innocent veterans in particular. The judge in the trial said the evidence presented by the Crown falls well short of the high standard of proof required in criminal cases. Well short. Yet, nevertheless, in 2 weeks' time, there'll be another case of another soldier from 53 years ago, which has already been reviewed for 4 years by the DPP and ruled as no case to answer. Despite that, which has no evidence whatsoever since then, that man is being put through misery and persecution now. A 78-year-old man sitting in anxiety in his home, waiting for prosecution for a case that should never be brought. Does the Secretary of State not recognise that this is injustice? Injustice wrapped up however he likes it, it's injustice. And his legislation will mean many more such cases will occur.
Well, I would say to the right honourable gentleman that the legislation that the government has put before the House will make no change at all to the basis on which decisions about any potential prosecutions are made. None. Indeed, that system will remain as it has done right the way through the course of the Troubles and in the 27.5 years since they took. It is the case. Decisions about prosecutions are taken independently by prosecutors, and it is not for us to gainsay the decisions that those prosecutors take, because it is the absolute bedrock of our independent judicial system.
Mr. Speaker, some 250,000 people served in Operation Banner, and the vast majority did so with great distinction and huge bravery, leading to the peace that we see in Northern Ireland today. When it comes to prosecutions of Army veterans, the numbers are vanishingly small. So will the Secretary of State join me in thanking those veterans for their service and condemn the rhetoric that at times is coming out of the Conservative benches, which is unnecessarily stoking fear amongst those veterans?
Well, I have already expressed the thanks of the government in my answer to the honourable gentleman's question, and I think those sentiments are felt right across the House.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the clear and just verdict delivered by Justice Lynch, which rightly found Soldier F not guilty on all charges. Vindication for a man who served his country with honour and distinction. Does the Secretary of State agree that this case again exposes the disgrace of vexatious prosecutions of aged veterans pursued where there was never even evidence capable of meeting the threshold for conviction, and that it is time to end the witch hunt once and for all? And will he further agree that around 90% of all deaths during the Troubles were caused by terrorists? Of the 10% that involved the security forces, the largest percentage of these were engaging terrorist and murderous and criminal activities, and therefore Sinn Féin's historical revisionism, exemplified by the First Minister's comments post-verdict, were deflammatory, and they equated to the murders with those who defended democracy. Sorry, my apologies. Seeks to equate murders with those who defended democracy is an attempt to smear our veterans and shouldn't be allowed.
Well, I would say to the honourable member that I agree with her that 90% of those who were killed during the Troubles were killed by paramilitary terrorists, which is why the vast majority of those who have been prosecuted and convicted have been paramilitary terrorists. But I do not agree with her when she uses the phrase vexatious prosecutions. There are no vexatious prosecutions. There are no vexatious prosecutions, because if the honourable member argues that a prosecution decision is vexatious, then she is criticising the independent prosecuting authorities in taking their decision on the basis of, is there a reasonable prospect of a conviction? Is it in the public interest to prosecute? And we should be extremely careful about trying to undermine an independent judicial system.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many IRA murders on UK soil have never been solved. They include the targeting of soldiers and their families in the M62 coach bombing in 1974 and the Warren Point massacre in 1979, the deadliest attack on the British Army during the Troubles. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that by shutting down investigations, including into the deaths of more than 200 Operation Banner soldiers, without an adequate alternative, the Legacy Act failed many families and victims of the Troubles?
I share my honourable friend's concern that she expressed about what happened as a result of the Legacy Act, but I do welcome the fact that in two of the cases she mentioned, the M62 coach bombing and Warren Point, they are now currently being investigated by the Independent Commission for Reconciliation and Information Recovery, because members of their families have chosen to refer those cases. I welcome that. I want more families to have more confidence in the Commission, which is why I am seeking to reform it, so that they too feel able to refer their cases in.
Sir Bernard.
Can I say I'm listening very carefully to the Right Honourable Gentleman, that the whole premise of his case is that it is somehow in the public interest for people in that community to carry on trying to find people to blame and prosecute on both sides of the argument. But isn't the real case here, not only is it an extraordinary injustice for people to be prosecuted for having done their duty as members of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, but that it doesn't serve the interests of peace and reconciliation to allow people and encourage people to carry on reopening the wounds when so much time and money has already been spent on trying to explain to people what happened to their loved ones. Nothing must detract from that sympathy, but it is a monstrous injustice that people in the line of duty who bear the scars of that conflict are paying the price for this almost politically correct process instead of drawing a line.
Well, I would gently say, to the Right Honourable Gentleman, I do not accept that characterisation he used at the end of his question. This is not a politically correct process. This is about trying to find a way forward for those families. Now, the honest answer to the fair point that he raises is that each family deals with the loss of their loved one in their own way. Some do not come forward. They live with their grief silently, alone. Others have campaigned. If it hadn't been for the campaigning of the Bloody Sunday families, there would not have been a Savile inquiry. We would not have got to the point where the former Prime Minister stood at this dispatch box to apologise for the killing of their loved ones. Having said that, in the vast majority of cases, no one is likely to be held to account through a judicial process. And that is why one of the focuses of the new commission will be on the fact-finding, the new body for information retrieval, to use all of the means at our disposal to try and provide answers to those families, and then it will be for them to decide how they come to terms with what happened. But we owe it to them to leave no stone unturned to put a system in place.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, as someone who served in Northern Ireland, I can just try and remind the House that this was the most peculiar operation that you would ever expect soldiers to do, to patrol streets in this United Kingdom, to defend people against terrorists here in the UK, against a very strict rules of engagement booklet, which made them, at a split-second decision, to have to make really complex decisions, and some of these are 18 years old, on the streets, petrified. So in that context, I simply say to the right honourable gentleman, he talks of equivalence, but over 700 British soldiers in Northern Ireland were killed by paramilitaries. Yep. Not one single paramilitary has been arraigned and taken to court for any of those murders that they conducted against the British Army and the British forces. I simply say to him, he talks of equivalence, but this is not equivalence, because it is those soldiers who will be persecuted for the rest of time, and not one single member of the paramilitaries who kept no records will ever go in front of a court. That's not fair.
Well, I would say to the right honourable gentleman, and I apologise if I've got this wrong, I don't remember using the word equivalence in what I had to say. What I said is that independent prosecutors will take decisions on the basis of the evidence they have before them. The current Legacy Commission is able to refer cases for potential prosecution. The new Legacy Commission will be able to do the same. And if there is evidence that will allow paramilitaries to be prosecuted, then it will be for the prosecutors to decide whether to bring a case. And if the right honourable gentleman cares to look at the convictions there have been since the Good Friday Agreement, most of them have related to paramilitaries. And as I said to the House a moment ago, most of the trials that are currently waiting to take place relate not to the armed forces but to paramilitaries.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Secretary of State not understand, given the judge's comments that the evidence fell well short of the standard required, that actually veterans do consider that that was a vexatious prosecution? Yeah. They do consider that Soldier B is a vexatious prosecution, and they do feel utterly betrayed by this government repealing the Legacy Act. Yeah.
On the last point the honourable gentleman raises, the Legacy Act offered a false promise of immunity. That's what it did. It was found to be incompatible with our obligations. It had no support in Northern Ireland. At some point, those on that side of the House need to recognise it had no support in Northern Ireland. How can Northern Ireland move forward if the basis of the last government's legislation lacks that support? And in those circumstances, it is for prosecutors to take decisions. And we need to respect that. People may agree or disagree, but we need to respect the system in which prosecution decisions are taken independently, because there are other countries in the world where that is not the case.
Julian.
Any Secretary of State envisage any circumstances under which an IRA terrorist could be prosecuted after he has received a letter of comfort? And if so, what are those circumstances?
Well, I would cite to him the case of Mr. John Downey, as I've referred to in the House before. He received one of those letters, and as a result of having received it, his trial for the Hyde Park bombings was halted by the judge, but the public record will show, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Downey is currently awaiting trial for 2 murders during the Troubles, in which case the letter he received cannot be said to have granted him immunity from prosecution.
Jim Allister.
Speaker, I greatly welcome the not guilty verdict on Soldier F, but has the Secretary of State no empathy with Soldier F, a man who has put through years of turmoil and torture, awaiting prosecution, in circumstances where it was patently obvious that the evidence was never going to stack up? As a lawyer, I'm absolutely astounded that this prosecution got as far as it did, because it relied entirely, in terms of what was relevant, on the word of 2 individuals, both of whom by then had been depicted as liars and perjurers, and neither of whom could be cross-examined. And yet our so-called independent prosecution service persisted with this prosecution. Is that not the very essence of what is vexatious? And going forward, does the Secretary of State agree that those who campaigned for this persecution of Soldier F should accept the verdict that he is not guilty and leave the man to live out his years in peace?
Well, it is a fundamental principle of our legal system that we accept the verdict of the courts, even if we may not agree with them. The honourable gentleman is a distinguished lawyer, and he expresses his views about the basis of that prosecution. The only point that I am making is that decision is made by independent prosecutors and not by any of us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And 51 years ago this month, 21 people were murdered and 200 people injured in the Birmingham pub bombings. And last week, the Security Minister issued a statement saying that he would not be recommending a public inquiry, that instead the Justice for 21 could pursue justice via the Commission for Reconciliation that the Secretary of State's referred to. But BBC Northern Ireland are reporting that actually, because there has been an inquest into these bombings, that it would not be in scope for the Commission to look into the Birmingham pub bombings. So could the Secretary of State at the dispatch box confirm to the families Justice for 21 that it would indeed be possible for the Commission to look into it?
Secretary of State.
It would indeed be possible for them to refer the case into the Commission.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State, I first of all declare an interest as I served in the Ulster Defence Regiment and also the Royal Artillery for some 14.5 years. The ruling was expected as there was no additional evidence. It twice held to be not fit for prosecution, and others have referred to that. It seems to me hard to understand how you pursue something when you don't have the criminal investigation and the evidence sorted in advance. It is clear that the Secretary of State must address the way forward and provide certainty for those service personnel who know they served honourably in impossible conditions, yet they live with the sort of Damocles hanging over their head, waiting to have their service used as a tool by Republicans to make it seem they were fighting a dirty war when quite clearly they weren't. So will the Secretary of State send a message today that the Secretary of State will not sign off of the narrative that our troops, the RUC and the Ulster Defence Regiment, were ever anything other than honourable men and women putting their lives on the line for us, and that they will be protected as honourably as they protected us? And how does the Secretary of State intend to protect them better than what we're doing right now?
Secretary of State.
Well, the honourable gentleman will be aware of the protections that we have put in the legislation following the discussions I referred to earlier that we've had with veterans, and I join him again in paying tribute to the extraordinarily brave service of all those who served during the time of Operation Banner in trying to protect the people of Northern Ireland from the terrorists. I would make the point that I know the whole House would agree with. When some people argue there was no alternative to that terrorism, there was. And we saw it in the signing of the Good Friday Agreement and what happened thereafter. There was always an alternative, and that is why we should always support those who did their duty honourably.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State balked at the word equivalence, so I have a go with another one. Does he believe that Northern Ireland terrorists should be treated equally in the same way as Northern Ireland veterans? And if he does, why doesn't he issue letters of comfort to the Northern Ireland veterans?
Secretary of State.
Well, the origin of the letters of comfort, or on-the-run letters, however one wishes to describe them, arose out of the time after the Good Friday Agreement, and the honourable gentleman will be well aware of that. But they did not, as I explained in answer to the right honourable gentleman's question a moment ago, they did not give anyone immunity from prosecution. And that is an extremely important point to make. And anyone who gives the impression that it gave immunity from prosecution is, I'm afraid, causing people unnecessary worry when the facts don't support it.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As we move to Remembrance Sunday, many of those who served in Operation Banner will reflect on comrades that they lost, comrades who were injured, and comrades who still suffer mentally in regards to the operation that they were deployed on, the British Army's longest continuous deployment. The Secretary of State from the dispatch box has said his Troubles Bill will bring strong protections for veterans. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't. It brings the same protections for everyone under that bill, including those who possibly perpetrated those murderous acts of terrorism in Northern Ireland. So what can the Secretary of State actually provide in regards to the continuous support for veterans, rather than something that actually isn't in the legislation but is promised by government rather than is actually in the face of the bill?
Well, I would say to the honourable gentleman that the protections were put in place for veterans after consulting veterans, and they are not unimportant. The ability to stay at home and to give evidence, the protection from repeated investigations, the right to seek immunity in a hearing of the Commission. You have the right to seek that in a coroner's court. There are, of course, the two protections: protection from cold calling, and also the right to be heard through the statutory advisory group that will be established working alongside the Commission, which will have representation from a member of the armed forces or a police force. And those are very practical changes we've made, which, as I said earlier, were not contained in the current Legacy Act.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State is right to say that this Remembrance Month underlines the debt of gratitude that we owe to those who serve our nation, but many in my constituency feel that that stands in stark contrast to the fundamental failure in our nation's duty of care to veterans of Operation Banner. The Secretary of State suggests that the Troubles Legacy Bill won't increase the risk of veterans being dragged through the courts, but veterans feel the reality is different. In the letter that my honourable friend referred to, they call it lawfare. They say that there's a legal conveyor belt of civil actions that are taking place. Isn't it time for a time limit on the civil actions related to historic military operations?
Well, the honourable member raises an important point. It is, however, very important to distinguish, as I know she will, between potential criminal prosecutions, which are the result of decisions of independent prosecutors, and civil cases. I mean, one of the other things that the courts found was that the ban on civil cases was incompatible with our human rights obligations. And I would point out that there has already been a civil case in relation to a paramilitary which found against that individual. And it is a fundamental feature of our system that people are able to bring civil cases. Decisions about how those cases are disposed of is rightly a matter for the courts.
My thoughts today are with the families of the Bloody Sunday victims and with the people of Derry who have carried the burden of grief, truth and justice for more than 5 decades. What happened on Bloody Sunday is not up for debate. The Savile inquiry established in painstaking detail what the parachute regiment did to peaceful civil rights demonstrators on the Bogside. So, Mr. Speaker, can the Secretary of State explain how it was determined and who determined that Soldier F qualified for Ministry of Defence funding and what precedent this decision was based on, particularly given reports that he received double the financial support typically afforded to a single defendant? If he was eligible for legal aid, that avenue was open for him. Instead, £4.3 million of public money was spent defending a man who, in his own evidence to the Southern Inquiry, admitted his lethal role in the state-sanctioned murders on Bloody Sunday. Does the Secretary of State believe that this represents an equal and impartial application of justice, or a two-tiered system designed to shield the British state from accountability?
Well, I would say to the honourable member that the Savile inquiry report made very, very sobering and distressing reading for all of us. And like many members here, I was in the House to hear the former Prime Minister Lord Cameron make that apology to the family, something they'd campaigned for years and years and years when justice was denied them. And I will always remember the photographs of the fists that came out of the window in the Guildhall in Derry, Londonderry, as they heard what the Prime Minister at the time had said from this dispatch box. On the first point that she raises, it is right and proper that the Ministry of Defence provides support to any veteran who is facing a criminal justice process. I think we would expect nothing less.
John Cook. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's important that we in this House remember that terrorists killed members of this House, including Airy Neve, only a few hundred yards from where we stand today. The Secretary of State on previous occasions has indicated that something like 9 inquests could now restart. He has said that Loughgall, an exemplary special forces operation in which brave men stood up against terrorists and nullified them, will be one of those. He has not said which other 8 will be reopened. Can he take the opportunity to do that here today?
Very good. So,
well, I will do so when we have been able to inform the families in those cases. I hope the honourable gentleman would accept that it's only right and proper that we inform the families first, and then I will make a list available on the reason for the Loughgall inquest. As he will be aware, the former Attorney General on the 23rd of September 2015 said, and I quote, "Following careful consideration of a huge amount of material, I have come to the decision that new inquests into the Loughgall deaths are justified."
Mr. Speaker, can the Secretary of State tell the House how it is compatible with the sovereignty of the United Kingdom to give the Irish government an official role, effectively a veto, over the new framework that the government proposes? And is he confident that the Irish state itself will do everything it can to ensure that its agents are held to account for any collusion that may have happened in atrocities carried out by Irish nationalists during the Troubles?
The Irish government does not have a veto. I stood next to the Taoiseach, Simon Harris, and I made commitments on behalf of the British government, and he made commitments on behalf of the Irish government. And all of us in the House who wish families to get answers that they've been searching for so long should welcome the fact that the Irish government is prepared to move from where they are now, because they oppose the Legacy Act to a place where they will give it the fullest cooperation, and in the course of that, we all hope to provide more information, to give more families answers. That is what we are trying to do, and I hope the honourable gentleman will welcome the fact that the two governments are working together on this, because it will help families.
Right, we'll let the front benches change over. Point of order, it is to this, yes. Sir David.
Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State, during the course of his responses today, has said 2 things. On the one hand, he has said letters of comfort do not give immunity. And on the other hand, he accepted that letters of comfort stopped the prosecution of Mr. Downey in the Hyde Park bombing. It seems to me these two statements are inconsistent. What is available to him to correct Hansard to make one of them put right?
Secretary of State.
What I said was indeed absolutely accurate, as the Right Honourable Gentleman well knows. the circumstances of the trial of Mr Downey in relation to the Hyde Park bombing, the reason why the judge called that to a halt was set out, but subsequent statements made it quite clear that those letters of comfort did not constitute immunity, as the subsequent events, not least the impending prosecution of Mr Downey, demonstrates.
Right, we let the front benches change over. Before the Home Secretary makes a statement, I must advise the House that charges have been brought against a named individual and the matter is now sub judice. Members should take care not to say anything in the House that might prejudice a criminal trial. I will therefore urge members to avoid speculating about the guilt or innocence of an individual or the motive for the attacks. The Home Secretary may wish to make factual statements for the record. Members may wish to ask about the emergency services, the response to the attacks, the support to victims and families, and connected matters. But I urge the utmost caution in avoiding any remarks that might prejudice a future trial. I now call the Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I would like to make a statement on the horrific events that took place on the East Coast Main Line on Saturday evening. I am sure I speak for everyone in this House when I say that my thoughts today are first and foremost with the victims, with their family and their friends, and all those who experienced this terrifying attack. My deepest thanks go to the emergency services, the British Transport Police, Cambridgeshire Police, Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue, and the East of England Ambulance Service. The speed of their response, as well as their skill and professionalism, were exemplary. I would also like to pay tribute to the breathtaking bravery of those on the train itself, including the heroic acts of the passengers and train crew who intercepted the attacker. I would like to draw particular attention to one member of the onboard crew who ran towards danger, confronting the attacker for a sustained period of time and stopped his advance through the train. He put himself in harm's way, suffered grievous injuries as a result, and remains in hospital today in a critical but stable condition. On Saturday, he went to work to do his job. Today, he is a hero and forever will be. Mr. Speaker, there is now a live investigation into what happened on Saturday night and the events that led up to it. I am therefore limited in what I can say today without putting successful prosecution at risk, and I am sure that all here agree that there must be one priority right now, and that is bringing the person who committed this horrific crime to justice. However, I will share what facts I can. At 7:42 p.m. on Saturday evening, police were contacted about an incident on a train travelling from Doncaster to London, with reports of several stabbings on board. The quick thinking of the driver saw the train diverted to Huntingdon station. Within 8 minutes of the first 999 call, police had boarded the train and brought the attack to an end. 10 people were taken to hospital by the ambulance services, 8 of whom had life-threatening injuries. A further individual later self-presented at the hospital. 3 people have now been discharged, whilst 8 remain in hospital. I know that everyone in this House wishes them the swiftest and fullest recoveries possible. And I would like to thank the staff at Cambridge University Hospital for their life-saving care. I can confirm, as was reported over the weekend, that Operation Plato, the national police identifier for a terrorist attack, was declared. However, it was rescinded once the incident had been contained. The British Transport Police remain the lead force in this investigation. They stated yesterday that while counter-terrorism policing were initially involved, they have found, and I quote, nothing to suggest that this was a terrorist incident. At the scene, the police made 2 arrests. Since then, one man has been released who we now know was not involved. As of this morning, the other, one Anthony Williams, has been charged. In relation to the events in Huntingdon, he has been charged with 10 counts of attempted murder, 1 count of possession of a knife, and 1 of actual bodily harm. He has also been charged with a further count of attempted murder and possession of a bladed article in relation to events on a Docklands Light Railway train in the early hours of Saturday morning at London's Pontoon Dock. And Cambridgeshire police have, in the last few hours, reported additional earlier sightings and possible further offences. As is standard practice in these cases, they have now referred themselves to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, the IOPC, for independent scrutiny of their handling of these reports. For now, there is little I can say about this man and his past, beyond confirming that he is a British national and was born in this country, and that he was not known to the security services, counter-terror policing, or prevent. I know this House and the public will have many unanswered questions today about who this attacker was and about the events that led up to the attack. Those questions will be answered, but it will take time. The police and prosecutors must be allowed to do their work. Since Saturday's attack, the British Transport Police have increased their presence at key points in the transport network, though it should be noted that their operational assessment of the risk posed on our trains has not changed, as this was an isolated attack. It was also, of course, a knife crime. This government is committed to halving knife crime within a decade, and progress has been made this year. We have taken 60,000 knives off of our streets, banned zombie knives and ninja swords, and seen a 5% fall in all knife crimes, including an 18% reduction in homicides by knife. I know that ideas have already been suggested about how policing should change in response to this event. Once the facts are known, we must examine what more might have been done to stop this horrific attack from ever occurring, and whether there are measures that we must now take to better protect the public on our streets and on our trains. However, that must be done when all of the facts are available to us. Madam Deputy Speaker, the thoughts of the whole House are today with the victims of this horrific crime, their families and their friends, and all affected by what happened on Saturday night. The sickening act of the man who committed this crime was the very worst of humanity. But the actions of those who responded, who ran towards danger to save the lives of people they did not know, was the very best of us. I know we all share in paying tribute to their extraordinary bravery today, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. Our thoughts are with the victims of this appalling attack and their families, as the Home Secretary quite rightly said. I join her in paying tribute to the emergency services who responded so fast, and to the brave interventions by members of the public and the train staff that prevented an even worse tragedy from occurring. They are truly heroes. This attack has horrified and shocked the whole nation. People simply travelling by train were indiscriminately attacked. The horror the passengers experienced will likely stay with them forever. Anthony Williams has now been charged. As the Home Secretary said, he had been involved in previous incidents in Peterborough and in the early hours of Saturday morning was also allegedly involved in an attack on the Docklands Light Railway in London. Will she confirm, as I've been told, that police in London knew Williams' identity following that? And if so, were Cambridgeshire police informed so they could track him down? In essence, I'm asking, were there any opportunities to have prevented this from occurring? The Home Secretary said that Williams was not previously known to the security services, counter-terrorism policing or prevent. Can she also tell the House if Williams was previously known to the police more widely or to mental health services? Mr. Speaker, this all comes just weeks after a murderous Islamist terror attack on a Manchester synagogue, and just days after the horrendous murder of Wayne Broadhurst by an Afghan asylum seeker, both using knives. Although homicide has thankfully fallen by about 15% since 2010, and as the Home Secretary said, knife crime has fallen in recent years, every homicide and every knife attack is one too many. I saw, together with the Police Minister, the grief this causes at the funeral of a 15-year-old girl, Eliane Andam, murdered in Croydon just over 2 years ago. So, speaking in general, not in relation to this incident, does the Home Secretary agree that knife crime and knife homicide are still too high and we must do yet more? Does she agree that more knife crime offenders should go to jail? This is important because when offenders are in jail, they of course can't attack the public. Does she agree we need to ensure more people who carry knives, especially where they use them to threaten others, are jailed? I know of course there are pressure on prison places, but by deporting more of the 10,000 foreign nationals in prison, we could create more space. Madam Deputy Speaker, we also need to take more knives off our streets, and that means we have to dramatically increase the use of stop and search. A study this year by Professor Lawrence Sherman, the Met's former Chief Scientific Officer, found that raising stop and search levels in London to 2011 levels would lead to a 1/3 reduction in knife homicide. Some people complain that stop and search is used disproportionately in relation to some groups, but when measured in relation to the offending population, the disproportionality disappears, as set out by a recent policy exchange study. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, we should triple the use of stop and search to get knives off our streets and introduce year-round surge policing in the top 5% of high crime hotspots, which will of course include many train stations. We must also use technology more. There is work underway at the Home Office, which I know about, to develop technology to scan for knives at a distance, which it is hoped can distinguish knives from keys or mobile phones. And this, of course, could help police rapidly identify those carrying a knife in a public place. I wonder if the Home Secretary could provide an update on that development work, either straight away or, if you prefer, perhaps in writing later, because I really do think it could make a big difference. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, retrospective and live facial recognition can also identify wanted criminals, including those involved in knife crime. In Croydon Town Centre, the borough which the Police Minister and I represent in Parliament, in the last couple of years, around 200 wanted criminals, including 2 wanted rapists and others guilty of knife crime, who would not otherwise have been caught, were arrested using live facial recognition, and crime in Croydon Town Centre, including knife crime, has gone down as a result. The images of innocent passers-by are immediately and automatically deleted, addressing civil liberties concerns. So I really do hope the Home Secretary agrees and the Police Minister agrees that rolling out this technology nationally will have a dramatic impact on improving public safety, and they will certainly have my full support if they choose to do that. Madam Deputy Speaker, I know everyone in this House wants to see knife crime eradicated, more today, I'm sure, than ever before. So I hope the House will also support the tough steps needed to eradicate knife crime, because we owe the victims of these appalling crimes actions as well as words.
Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Shadow Home Secretary for his remarks, and in particular, as he opened his response, I know that the bravery of all of those who faced this attack on Saturday is something that has unanimous support across this House, and I thank him for the spirit in which he reflected that. He will know, in relation, as I said in my opening statement, in relation to the events in Peterborough, they are now the subject of an IOPC investigation. It's important that I don't say anything that seeks to get ahead of that, but I'm sure all of those questions will be answered in the fullness of time, and it is standard practice where there has been contact with police in the run-up to an event like this that those matters are referred to the IOPC to investigate and consider. He'll also know that I can't say anything in relation to the suspect who's been charged and any prior history or indeed any mental health issues, because that would also be facts that are material to any future court proceedings, and it would be inappropriate for me or indeed anybody else in this House to comment or speculate on those matters today. And I would just ask that the words of the Speaker at the opening of this part of our session are remembered as we pose questions today. I agree with him that knife crime is far too high. This government is impatient to do everything it can to eliminate knife crime. It's why we've set ourselves an ambitious target, and we're pleased to have made some progress, though I agree with him that there is still much more to be done. And I hope on knife crime in particular, instead of playing politics across this House, where there is consensus, we are all able to work together in the spirit of trying to bring down the scourge of knife crime in our country. As I say, the numbers have gone in a positive direction, and I hope he will welcome that and work with us as we seek to make more progress. He referred to sentencing in particular. I do have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's disappointing when members opposite do not reckon with the scale of the crisis in our prison system. This government inherited a prison system on the brink of collapse. It has meant difficult decisions ever since we have entered office in order to prevent this country from running out of prison places entirely. He will know that this government has deported more foreign national offenders since our term of office than was the case in the previous record under the previous government. Despite deporting record numbers of foreign national offenders, the scale of crisis in the prison system means that there are still more prisoners coming into the system than there have been places, and it is important, therefore, that the sentencing reforms are seen in that context. He will know, though, that it is the case that those who are in possession of a knife and who have been using that in a threatening manner do attract, the majority of those people do attract reasonably lengthy prison sentences. When we know more about the circumstances of this particular case, we will know if there are other lessons for us to draw and other areas of policy for us to consider. He referenced stop and search, and he, I think, lamented the issues around disproportionality. I hope I'm not putting too much of a spin on his remarks. I would just gently remind him it was a former Tory Home Secretary in the first 2010 to 15 Parliament that started speaking about disproportionate use of stop and search powers and changed the rules around stop and search to reflect the disproportionate use of that power of the previous government. But I hope he will recognise that the police already have the power to use stop and search where the intelligence suggests that that is required. That is an operational decision for police chiefs. And of course, the decision as to whether to stop and search someone where there are reasonable grounds and suspicion is an individual operational decision for individual police officers. This is a well-used power. It is a well-understood power. It is an important power that is in our arsenal for tackling criminality, and this government fully supports its lawful use. Let me also say on live facial recognition, it's this government that will very soon be consulting on a new legal framework to underpin the use of live facial recognition. He will know that when his party was in power, it was left to individual police forces, and I believe it was South Wales and the Met who first rolled live facial recognition out, faced lots of legal challenges as a result thereof. The government did not then change their policy, but this government will consult on a legal framework so that all police forces across the country can use live facial recognition technology, confident that they will not find themselves defending those decisions in courts in the future. And I've also supported the rollout of 10 specific live facial recognition units across the country, and will look to do more as well in the coming months. In relation to scans for knives, let me just say to him on tech more broadly, I think there is much more that we can do to use new and emerging technology in order to help us tackle this type of criminality. And I'm happy to write to him about our current plans, but I will be setting out more in terms of our broader position in the coming weeks. Madam Deputy Speaker, Knife crime is a terrible, terrible crime. It claims far too many lives in our country. It is important that we keep doing everything we can to bear down on the damage that knife crime causes and provide pathways for those who get caught up in the carrying of knives. That is an important bit of policy that we will carry on working on. But in relation to the attack that we are talking about primarily today, I do urge the House that before we draw broader policy conclusions, we wait until more of the facts are known.
Select Committee Chair Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for all her remarks and also the Secretary of State for Transport, who's here today, for her comments on the media this morning. And I share, as all members of this House do, their concern for the victims and their families and her recognition of the heroism of so many in this tragedy on Saturday. On behalf of my colleagues on the Transport Committee, I would like to pay particular tribute to all the staff of Avanti West Coast and Network Rail who responded so quickly, and in particular to the train driver who reacted so promptly to get the train to Huntingdon in order that the emergency services could meet it, and also to the onboard staff member who is in hospital after protecting passengers. Now, I know that people may be nervous of travelling by train now, and I thank the work the government and the police services have done to ensure additional police presence at our rail stations, as I saw at Waterloo as I came on my way in here earlier. Now, given that the Home Secretary said the British Transport Police have said that their operational assessment of the risk posed on our trains has not changed, as this was an isolated attack, will the Home Secretary assure me that any long-term changes to security on our rail services will be considered very carefully, and once the full facts of this incident are known, and not rushed into without considering the potential downsides that may impact on the ease of travel by train?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. It's always a balance in terms of ease of travel for millions of people every single day and making sure that people are safe. And of course, this government, the Transport Secretary and the rest of government will make sure that any arrangements we have, whether we remain with the current arrangements or anything that might change in the future, always strikes the right balance. That's the most important thing. But for now, based on our current understanding of this attack, the risk assessment has not changed. And although we're providing more reassurance to people so they feel safe getting on the trains in the aftermath of this attack, at this point there are no proposals to go further, but we will of course review that once more of the facts are known.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This attack has left 11 people in hospital, one of them a member of the train staff who is in a critical but stable condition. My party's thoughts are with all those affected, the victims, their loved ones and everyone who witnessed such a shocking event. We also want to thank the emergency services and rail staff for their swift response, as well as the passengers who intervened to prevent further harm. After this sort of incident, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is vital the police are given the time and space they need to establish the full facts. That is ever more difficult due to the rapid spread of disinformation online in the immediate aftermath of these sort of attacks. Within hours, social media was flooded with speculation over the ethnicity and race of the perpetrator, inciting racist and Islamophobic comments. And when communities were still reeling from the horror of this attack, certain political figures on the hard right, including members of the Reform Party, were already seeking to exploit the incident for political gain. Desperate to involve themselves in the tragedy, they reached for their dog whistles. They threw around baseless opinions on levels of crime when facts were available. They were shamelessly trying to turn tragedy into yet another excuse to whip up fear and sow division. The Shadow Home Secretary's comments today also veered into that realm. Never is an opportunity to blame foreigners missed. That is beneath contempt. At moments like this, those who aspire to leadership must calm fears and attempt to unite, not inflame tensions. Does the Home Secretary share my view that while knife crime must be tackled forcefully, it's important that all of us must respond with arguments grounded in fact rather than trying to stoke fear? Can the Home Secretary confirm whether the government holds data on violent incidents involving knives or sharp instruments where 3 or more victims were harmed in a single incident? If so, what is the trend over the past 2 years or any other time frame the Home Secretary has data for? And finally, the Home Secretary has said that the individual was not known to anti-terror police or Prevent. But when the facts are known, will she confirm that proper lessons will be learned about individuals who may pose a risk, be it as a result of mental health issues, an obsession with extreme violence, or other relevant factors?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I deplore the ease with which so many armchair warriors feel the need to speculate and spread misinformation on social media. It's why it's important that the police and all of our emergency services are able to proceed with their investigations at pace, but also transparently, so as to calm down any tensions that might arise as a result of misinformation that spreads particularly across social media. In terms of how other people may or may not have reacted, I tend to think at moments of such crisis, people normally reveal their true colours, and I will leave my remarks about other individuals there. He is right that knife crime must be tackled forcefully. As I said in my earlier remarks, we've seen an 18% decrease in murders by knife. I will make sure he receives the further stats that he mentioned, but as I said earlier, that the data in relation to knife crime is going in a better direction, but I, like others in this House, am impatient to see more change more quickly, and I hope he will work with us on a cross-party basis on all measures needed in order to do that. And of course, when all of the facts around this case are known and understood, I will ensure that any lessons that there are to be learned will be learned and will be acted upon.
Sam Carling.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I take this opportunity to put on record my thanks to the first responders, the police, and everyone on the train who put their lives at risk to protect others. So many people from the communities I represent in both Peterborough and Huntingdonshire have written to me today in absolute fear, shock and confusion at how this can happen so close to home, particularly after we found out this morning that the charged individual is from my constituency. And I've had constituents really worried as well and alarmed about these reports over the last few hours that the offender may possibly have been involved in further incidents in Peterborough and London. So will the Home Secretary join me in calling for community cohesion following this incident and also ensure that a full investigation takes place into those possible other offences?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, and I can only imagine how terrifying it must have been for his constituents and those in neighbouring areas to hear news of this horrifying attack. He'll know I can't say any more at the moment about other potential incidents. They are the subject of further investigation, and as more facts are confirmed by the police, we will be able to say more. And of course, the IOPC must be allowed to do their work. And on community cohesion more broadly, of course, when we know more about the facts of this case, we'll know whether this relates to community cohesion or whether it relates to wider community issues. I would encourage members to wait until more of the facts are known before we draw those broader conclusions, but I do agree with him that it is necessary that we reassure communities in his constituency and across the country. That's why there is an increased police presence across the transport network, and it's why this government will make sure that as we know more, whether there are lessons to be learned, that they will be learned and acted upon.
Ben Obsijekti.
This has been a difficult and challenging weekend for Huntingdon. My thoughts are with the victims of this terrible tragedy, to the LNER crew member whose heroic and selfless actions, placing himself in harm's way, saved lives at the cost of his own safety, and who remains in a critical but stable condition. To the other 4 victims who remain in hospital with stab wounds, and to the 4 who were discharged yesterday, as well as those who bore witness to the attacks and will still be processing their own experiences. I would like to place on record my praise for the emergency services response to Cambridgeshire Constabulary, whose unarmed response officers and firearms officers were able to place Anthony Williams in custody within 8 minutes of receiving the 999 call. to Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue Services, our Air Ambulance Services and to the East of England Ambulance Trust for their incident response and for getting the casualties to Addenbrooke's Hospital. Also to the train driver, Andrew Johnson, and signalling staff whose speed of thought in moving the train onto the suburban line from the high-speed line meant that the train could make the unscheduled stop at Huntingdon, a decision that curtailed the attack by several crucial minutes, allowed the police to apprehend the suspect and undoubtedly saved lives. The swift action of all those involved prevented a horrific attack from being far, far worse. I'm sure the Home Secretary and indeed the whole House would wish to share in my sympathies for those impacted by this horrific attack and my pride in the conduct, leadership and professionalism of the responders and railway staff.
Well, can I thank the Honourable Member for both his question today, but also for his own work over the weekend. He was very quick to arrive at the scene, and I thought the Honourable Member handled himself with great honour and reflected in a very measured way the initial response to such a horrifying incident in his constituency. I think the way he's handled himself is a credit to him and to the people that he represents. And I, of course, agree with him in relation to his remarks about the bravery of all of those who were responding, the speed of the response, but also the bravery of those inside the train itself as well. And let me assure him that myself and my officials stand ready to work with him and others who are locally on the ground to make sure all lessons are learned as we move forward.
Andrew Pakes.
Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself with the comments about sympathy and empathy for the victims of this? The names of Peterborough and the town of my constituency of my right honourable friend Huntingdon have flashed up across the news and around the world this weekend because of the terrible events we've seen happening on Saturday night. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't want my constituency to be known just because of the acts of a single perpetrator. So can I pay my tribute to the police, the train staff, the first responders and others who stepped forward when the actions were needed to do that. And can I also pay particular tribute to my own constituent, train driver Andrew Johnson, and his ASLEF and RMT colleagues on LNER who went beyond the call of duty on that evening. They showed the best of British values and the true face of the county I represent and its people. We don't know all of the information yet, but there is great anxiety in Huntingdon and in Peterborough from many people locally, as well as this being a national issue. So can I ask my right honourable friend, can she confirm that we will go and move every mile to tackle knife crime, ensure our streets and public transport remain safe for everyone for years to come?
Thank you. Well, can I also pay tribute to my honourable friend? He made contact with myself and my officials very quickly after this attack came to light. And he, as other members in this House, is an assiduous constituency member of Parliament, and I'm sure he'll do everything he can to stand up for the people he represents and make sure that the wider area is not tainted by the actions of the attacker on Saturday. And he's absolutely right to remind the House that what we should remember is those who responded, not the acts of the attacker, but those that responded who put themselves in harm's way to protect those that they'd never met before and who are very much the absolute best of us. And again, I pay tribute to all of the staff on the train because what they were faced with was something utterly horrifying and they reacted with immense bravery and undoubtedly saved countless lives.
Dame Karen Bradley.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement and associate myself with the tributes that have been paid to the emergency services, the train crew, and our thoughts with the victims. When we have more information, I'm sure my committee will want to look at what actually happened and learn lessons from it. But can I draw the Home Secretary's attention to our current inquiry on new forms of radicalisation? And can I ask that if there are things that come out of this inquiry that are relevant for my inquiry, my committee's inquiry, that we make sure that we learn those points and include them as soon as possible?
Well, can I thank the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee for the points that she has just made, and I look forward to working with her closely as we learn more of the lessons once all the facts in relation to this case are known. She is right more broadly, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we are seeing many new forms of radicalisation in this country and across Europe and North America in particular as well. And it is important that we are always stress testing and challenging the response that government has to tackling those new forms of radicalisation. It will need a change, I think, longer term in our understanding of what motivates serious violent behaviour, and I'm sure that is work that she and her committee will continue with, and I pledge to work with them as we try to tease out more answers to these particular problems.
Florence Shalami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to associate my remarks with everyone who's made powerful tributes to both the train driver, the staff and members of the public, and I think this demonstrates why it is really important for us to have more than one person on the train. The train guards play a vital role in protecting passengers. My constituency is home to both Vauxhall and Waterloo, busy mainline stations. In under 6 weeks, we're going to have millions of people travelling on the public network service coming home for Christmas. Those people need to be reassured that train travel is an efficient and good way in terms of travelling across the country. My honourable friend, the Home Secretary, mentioned that there will be additional resources across the network for the next few weeks. Will that go on into that busy Christmas period? And this is an issue which obviously covers with the Department for Transport. There is the strange funding mechanism for the British Transport Police. Transport geeks will know that it's actually funded by the industry, not directly from the Home Office. But as we take on more control of the public network and the train service, this will fall onto the government. Is this an area that the Home Secretary and the Transport Secretary will be looking at and making sure we've got a funded, fully funded British Transport Police to protect people travelling on public transport?
Well, thank my honourable friend for her question. The first thing I would say, Madam Deputy Speaker, is thankfully incidents as we saw on Saturday are very rare. And our train system is, generally speaking, very safe, and millions of people use it every day without incident. So we have a strong base, I think, to build on. But of course, given what has happened and the horrifying nature of the attack and the indiscriminate way in which victims were stabbed whilst on that train on Saturday, it is important, I think, that British Transport Police have made that decision to increase police presence across the railway network. It's an operational decision for them as to how extensive that is and how long that goes on, but we have a very good working relationship with British Transport Police. I've been very impressed with their response to this attack. I've been working very closely with them over the weekend. I do pay tribute to them and all of their officers, and I will be led by British Transport Police in terms of the operational decisions that they are making. On the wider policy questions that she raises, as more of the network is nationalised, I will of course pick up those conversations with the Transport Secretary.
Charles.
Deputy Speaker, more generally on knife crime, isn't there a disconnect though between what magistrates are able to do? For example, under the Restriction of Offences Weapons Act, somebody can get a custodial sentence, let's say 51 weeks, and yet under the government's current sentencing bill, there will be a presumption that a 12-month custodial sentence will not be required. So I just wondered what the Home Secretary might do to try and get around that, to ensure that the magistrates do have more powers, more sentencing powers, given that, yes, possession of a knife is not the use of a knife, but clearly the one so often sadly does lead to the other. So there's clearly a legislative disconnect, and I hope the Home Secretary will look at that. Thank you.
Well, can I thank him for his question? He will know the average sentence for threatening with a knife is actually more than a year. It's around 15 months. It wouldn't be caught by the presumption in the current sentencing bill. I would also say to him, it's a presumption within the sentencing bill, not a blanket ban on sentences of under 12 months. There is still discretion for judges in all cases, and the bill does set out the circumstances in which that presumption can be overridden. It will always be a matter for the independent judiciary based on the facts of the case in front of them.
start by joining others in expressing sympathy to all those who've been affected. My thanks to the emergency services, the members of the public who got involved, and of course that train crew who acted heroically to protect their passengers. The Home Secretary will understand that there is given the developments today and her statement on the incident in East London in Pontoon Dock in my constituency, there's a great deal of anxiety and fear amongst my constituents of West Ham and Beckton. I'd like to place my thanks on the record, my thanks to the police for their engagement this afternoon with me. What assurances can she give to my constituents on the safety on public transport, particularly in East London, where we have a lot of smaller, unstaffed, open access, doctrine-like railway stations that are used and are essential to the daily life of my constituents?
Well, my honourable friend will know I'm limited in terms of what I can say, given it's a live police investigation. The police have obviously confirmed some of those facts already, but their investigation must be allowed to continue without further speculation. But he makes a good point on, and I can well understand why people in his constituency or those who regularly use this particular station will feel concerned. It is why BTP have increased patrols in order to provide additional reassurance to the community. We have nothing that suggests that that was a particular location of interest at this point, and I hope that that does reassure his constituents.
Could I echo tributes to train staff and to the emergency services, to her and her team, who I'm sure were working flat out all weekend. Obviously, the case is going through an investigation, but could I urge her to, given the events of Saturday and the run-up to Saturday night, could I urge her to bring together police chiefs to talk about information sharing and any further resource they require? And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm happy to admit we should not have diluted stop and search, but could I now urge her to look again at stop and search? Northern Ireland is much more permissive, and Section 60 does need to be reviewed.
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his question and for his remarks. My experience over the weekend in terms of the different police forces and different emergency services who responded to this attack is actually that they work together very well, and I was very pleased to see that level of coordination, especially when different forces are responsible for different things. But you know, at the start of this incident, counter-terror police were supporting the investigation. That was stood down, but if it had needed to be stood up again, I know that that would have been almost instantaneous as soon as the request was made. So my initial experience of and impression of the collaborative working has been very positive, and I do pay tribute to everyone involved in that over the weekend. On information sharing, I will take that away because I think that, and reflect on what he said, it is important, especially when there's such a huge incident taking place in the country with lots of information going out through different forms, that we make sure that there is complete coordination. If he has any specific concerns in relation to this incident, I'll be very happy for him to write to me, and I will ensure that I respond, but I will pick up that conversation with the NPCC and others as well. And look, let me just reassure him on stop and search. I think this is a very valuable tool that the police have. I will always want to see it used wherever it is appropriate to do so. My understanding and my conversations with police so far suggest that from their operational perspective, the powers they have work quite well. But of course, I will always be open-minded and be willing to look again at any of these issues should the advice from police change, or should the experience that we have of the way that the powers are used change as well.
Picture.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If I can start by just associate myself with the many tributes that have been given today to those people on the train that tried to prevent the attack, the staff and the responders. As a member of Doncaster Eastern Isle of Axome, I use the Doncaster King's Cross service most weeks. I know many of my constituents and people across Doncaster are deeply shaken by this appalling attack, but that service is an indispensable part of our lives. So will my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, set out the immediate steps that she's taken to reassure passengers who use that line, but also the best way that we communicate that to ensure that they have peace of mind as they travel on those trains over the next few days?
Well, look, I think we should all take confidence from the speed of the emergency services response to this attack, which has drawn justified and wide praise across this House today. As I say, the speed of that response meant the attack was brought to an end as quickly as possible, and many lives, I believe, were saved as a result of that response. And I do think that whilst the incident itself is deeply shocking, and I can fully understand that people who use the service on a regular basis will be feeling shaken by this news. The fact that our emergency services were able to respond so quickly, I think, is something that we should all be confident in and take pride in. And then, of course, the British Transport Police have increased police presence across the network in order to provide more reassurance to people. But as I say, thankfully, in this country, incidents of this nature across our transport network are very, very rare. And I think everyone in this House will want to work together to make sure that remains the case.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I join the Home Secretary and my constituency neighbour, the Honourable Member for Huntingdon, in their thoughts for the victims and their families. And also in paying tribute to Cambridgeshire Police, Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue, the East of England Ambulance Service, the staff at Addenbrooke's Hospital, and of course the train crew and passengers for their response on Saturday evening. Now, while respecting the ongoing investigation and the IOPC process, can she assure the House that the extraordinary bravery and professionalism demonstrated by all those involved in containing this incident and providing life-saving care will be properly recognised in due course?
Well, I thank the Honourable Member, and I, of course, absolutely agree with everything he said in praise of all of those who responded to this attack. I will make sure that once we are through court proceedings and the full facts of the incident are known, there will be an appropriate moment to be able to thank all of our emergency services and the brave passengers in an appropriate way when the time is right.
Rachel Hopkins. Thank you,
Close.
All the LNER train crew and train driver involved in the action. Their swift action and their extensive training to respond to emergencies was undoubtedly critical to saving many lives. Railway staff will be deeply concerned that this terrible incident has taken place against a backdrop of year-on-year increases on violent assaults on rail staff. What conversations is the Home Secretary having with the Department for Transport colleagues regarding resources and support needed to keep rail staff and passengers safe on our railways?
Well, I know that from my conversations with the Transport Secretary over the weekend, these are issues that are very much on her mind. And of course, there is crossover with those of us in the Home Office, but primarily the responsibility sits with the Transport Secretary. I will make sure that she gets a fuller response to her question, but she should rest assured that in this government, we recognise that assaults on any of our public sector workers are unacceptable, and the government will always do everything it can to stamp that out.
Barclay.
Madam Deputy Speaker, could I join my fellow Cambridgeshire MPs in the tributes they've made? The Home Secretary, in her statement, indicated she was receptive to the deployment of facial recognition at railway stations. Could she clarify on the current timeline, what's the earliest date that would be deployed more widely? And given some of the early lessons coming out of this case, what scope is there for the government to accelerate that timeline?
Well, the consultation that I referred to in my earlier remarks in terms of the legal framework for much wider use of live facial recognition will just be in the next few weeks, so that's all but upon us. I referred to the funding for 10 new mobile units which has been made available, and British Transport Police is preparing a pilot of live facial recognition technology at selected railway stations in London. It will run for a period of 6 months. The exact dates will be public in due course, and I will make sure we write to him with those when they are decided.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With LNER headquartered in my constituency of York, I have written to David Horn, the Managing Director, to offer my support to him and pass on my best wishes to his crew. I also want to put on record my thanks to the signallers who made it possible to shift the train onto the line, who are also based in my constituency of York. Last summer, I sought to amend the Crime and Policing Bill with an amendment to provide greater protections for transport staff in the light of the increased risks they are facing. With the bill about to enter committee stage in the House of Lords, will the Home Secretary look at my amendments again and ensure that we do provide those protections for transport staff?
Honourable friend, I'll happily discuss with her the content of her earlier amendment, and even if not accepted for the bill, I'll ensure that the policy question that she's raising is picked up by our colleagues in the Transport Department.
We are running out of time, so I'll ask the questions to be short and, of course, the answers as well. Stephen Gethings.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I put on the record our best wishes to the victims and our thanks to the emergency services and railway staff who did a remarkable job. I know she can't comment on the case in particular, but one concern that I have is around the speculation and disinformation that is rife on social media. Can she make it her job to maybe have a conversation with the social media companies, because that kind of speculation does no service to the victims or to the police who are pursuing this issue?
The most important thing is that official sources of information are able to be as transparent as quickly as possible, so the vast majority of this country that doesn't just get its news from social media knows what is happening. Of course, there'll be a role for the Online Safety Act in future as well.
Sir.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I do thank the Secretary of State for her statement and for bringing it to us so promptly. I use LNER every week to come to this place, and I always knew the staff were great, but I didn't realise they were heroes. And I think the response we've seen from both the staff and the public on the train really was the best of Britain. But I think the response of social media was absolutely shameful, I'm honest, absolutely shameful. And it shames us as a country, actually. Yeah. But LNER does connect Edinburgh South West to destinations north and south. And I'm sure my residents will be really pleased to hear what they are looking at facial recognition on the transport network, because I think it's incredibly important. But if I can talk about knife crime more generally, in June the government gave a commitment to look at round-tip knives, the manufacture and sale of them, and hopefully mandating that. Is the Home Secretary able to give us an update on this? And I'm sorry for putting her on the spot.
We'll be publishing a knife crime strategy very soon. What I would say about rounded top knives is I understand the reason why some people think that is part of the solution. I will, of course, consider all of the evidence, but in the end, we have millions of normal kitchen knives available, and so we've got to do a much better job on all of the other areas, such as prevention.
Julian Lewis.
Very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, when the Home Secretary is undertaking lessons learned and recommendations for the future, will she look into the question as to whether there is any protective equipment or even disabling equipment of a non-lethal nature that could be issued to staff for use in such an emergency?
Thank you. Well, we'll know that tasers were deployed to bring this incident to a close on Saturday. But let me assure him, even if it's not part of the wider lessons learnt from this case, once all the facts are known, I will, of course, take under consideration the points that he has made.
Nav Mishra.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, my thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this brutal attack, and of course my tribute to the amazing courage and bravery of the train crew, but also the first responders. Like my friend from Vauxhall raised, I have serious concerns about the funding arrangements for British Transport Police. So can I encourage my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, to work with the Department of Transport and the Secretary of State for Transport to make sure that the funding arrangements for BTP are good going forward?
Yes, I agree with my honourable friend of the vital role that BTP plays. Their funding for this year is actually 6% higher than previously. They have a hugely important role, and I'm sure the Transport Secretary will do everything she can on the funding front.
Clennis Meddy.
Mine and Plaid Cymru's colleagues' thoughts are with everyone affected by this appalling attack. They're also with the train driver, crew and staff whose quick thinking and decisive action helped protect many from the worst of outcomes. Will the Secretary of State join me in expressing gratitude for their bravery and for showing us all how crucial the presence of officers and sufficient staffing is to our public safety? Surveillance can help catch criminals, but staff on the ground saves lives.
Here, good question.
She makes a very good point, and it is undoubtedly the case that the staff on the ground in this incident saved lives.
Neil Duncan-Jordan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I echo the Home Secretary's comments earlier and the tributes paid in the House already? She will know, though, that the British Transport Police is facing an unprecedented funding deficit that threatens the safety on our railways. There's currently 8.5 million shortfall, with the threat to nearly 300 jobs. Will she therefore meet with the Transport Secretary to discuss how we can fully fund the BTP as a matter of urgency?
Well, I would repeat that the BTP for year 25-26 have been awarded £415 million, which is an increase of almost 6% this year, and I'm sure the wider funding issues are something that the Transport Secretary is considering.
Eastwood. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I also want to pay tribute to those who were on the train, the staff and the first responders, as well as members of the public. Could I also ask the Home Secretary to consider comments made by the Right Honourable Member for Staffordshire Merlins in terms of the new ways of radicalisation? The previous Home Secretary also referenced this at the dispatch box, and I will be very keen to hear her views on it. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The Honourable Lady is absolutely right to raise the issue of the wider forms of radicalisation that we are now starting to see in this country. She should rest assured I will ensure, even if it's not relevant to the specific lessons to be drawn from this case, that is very much on the minds of all of us in government as we seek to meet the scale of the new challenge that we face.
Paul Davies.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I fully support the remarks made by the British Transport Police Deputy Chief Constable Stuart Cundy that the heroic actions of the LNER staff member undoubtedly saved lives. At a recent meeting with the TSSA, they raised concerns about policing budgets and the unique pressures facing the British Transport Police. What discussions has the Minister had with the Treasury to ensure a fair funding settlement, one that safeguards their operational capacity and ensures the continued safety of passengers across our network?
Well, I would repeat the earlier answers I've given in relation to funding, and you should rest assured these are matters that we are discussing with the Transport Department.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In her review, will the Home Secretary undertake to look at the very serious problem of some trains operating without any staff on at all, some very busy trains with insufficient staff on, and hundreds of stations all over the country, particularly in the evenings, with no staff on at all, where the public are obviously, the travelling public, are obviously very vulnerable and at risk? Can we pause driver-operated only trains and look at the issues of safety for the public as a whole?
Well, we will be led by the operational assessment made by British Transport Policing in terms of what is required, and he should rest assured the government will make sure that where we have a role to play in terms of keeping people safe on the transport network, we will do so.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Just thoughts are with the victims of this horrific attack. The RMT union has called for urgent meetings with the government, with police and the industry to ensure that we have the strongest resources and procedures in place to protect staff and passengers. Can she confirm that the Department for Transport and the Home Office will facilitate these meetings as soon as possible?
Well, I can assure her that myself and the Transport Secretary will, of course, be discussing all and any lessons to be drawn from this incident, and that there will be a cross-government response that meets the scale of the challenge that we face.
Adam.
Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Minister share my deep concerns that when heinous incidents like this occur, certain political commentators and sadly certain politicians race to set the narrative behind such attacks as ethnicity or faith-based, or ideally both, rather than focusing on the key crime indicators like socio-economic deprivation, disintegration of youth services, addiction issues, lack of funding for our police force, or lack of mental health support facilities? Does she agree these factors matter much more than ethnicity, faith, or migration status of the perpetrator?
Well, I think he's getting rather ahead of what facts are currently known about what lay behind this particular attack, so he'll understand if I refrain from making broader conclusions about the motivations here. I think it is important learning the lessons of what happened after the Southport attacks, that government moves quickly and that police move quickly to make all shareable information available to prevent the spread of disinformation and potential public disorder.
That is the end of the statement on the response to the Huntingdon train attack. I'll give the front benches a few moments to shuffle over. Order, Ruth Cadbury.
I ask that the record be corrected? I inadvertently said Avanti West Coast. I must have been thinking of the derailment and not the tragic incident, which was, of course, on LNER.
Thank you so much for the correction. Now duly on the record, please seated. Is it really a point of order, Jim Shannon?
There isn't. In my constituency of Strangford today in Portavogie, a young man was killed in a knife attack, and I think perhaps maybe in order for mention that there, and perhaps the House would join me.
Mr. Jim Shannon, that is very important, Mr. Jim Shannon, but we cannot continue that statement. It is now concluded. Point of order, Chris Phillips.
Very briefly, I think the Home Secretary may have misheard me during my question. I was saying that I was not concerned about disproportionality of stop and search because when you compare it to the offending population, there is no disproportionality, and I was encouraging further use of the tactic. Just wanted to make sure the Home Secretary had heard and received that message.
The Home Secretary has most definitely got that on the record. I will now continue with the business of the day. The Clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Public Office Accountability Bill, second reading.
Now. Prime Minister, to move second reading.
Thank you very much. I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Before I come to the bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to put on record in this House my own tribute to the police, the first responders, and in particular to the heroic actions of both the driver and members of staff on board the Doncaster to London train, where such a vile and horrific attack took place this weekend. We all share in the revulsion of this shocking incident, but there's no doubt that their collective action, their brave action, saved countless lives, and I know the whole country is grateful for that. Madam Deputy Speaker, 36 years ago, 97 men, women and children went to a Liverpool football match in Sheffield, an FA Cup semi-final, an occasion of joy, and they never came home to their families. Madam Deputy Speaker, I invite the House just to reflect on that simple statement of fact, what that might feel like. Nearly 15 years ago, when I was Director of Public Prosecutions, I met many of the Hillsborough families during the independent panel led by Bishop James Jones. I will never forget what they told me, their testimony, painful to tell, painful to hear, including the testimony of Jenny Hicks, who told me how she and her husband drove their two teenage girls to the game that day. They had to drive back later with an empty back seat. Every single story, every single experience, painful to the core, unimaginable to the core. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, before I come on to the bill and the contents of the bill, I want to begin this debate with a simple acknowledgement, long overdue, that the British state failed the families and victims of Hillsborough to an almost inhuman level. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, those victims and their families, their strength, their courage, their refusal to give up, a determination no matter what was thrown at them, to fight for people they'll never know or meet, to make sure that they never go through something like this again. They are the reason we stand here today with this bill. They are the reason why it will be known as the Hillsborough Law, and they are the reason, Madam Deputy Speaker, why we say clearly again what should have been said immediately, that their loved ones were unlawfully killed and that they never bore any responsibility for what happened in Sheffield that day. And we say it from this dispatch box today. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, the entire country knows what happened next. You know, we often call Hillsborough a tragedy. But it's more than a tragedy, because the disaster was not down to chance. It was not an accident. It was an injustice. and then further injustice piled on top, when the state subjected those families to endure from the police lies and smears against their loved ones, while the central state, the government, aided and abetted them for years and years and years. A cover-up by the very institutions that are supposed to protect and to serve. And Madam Deputy Speaker, it is nothing less than a stain on modern history of this country. And yet, can we truly say that Hillsborough was an isolated example? No. Because there's also the Horizon scandal, Grenfell Tower, infected blood, the grooming gangs, Windrush, and more besides. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we should also be blunt that there's a pattern common to all these scandals, that time and again the British state struggled to recognise injustice because of who the victims are, because they're working class, because they're black, because they're women and girls. That is the injustice that this bill seeks to correct, and I hope it commands the support of the whole House.
Yeah.
I will.
Most grateful. Would you agree there are a couple of things missing from this otherwise excellent bill? The first is an acknowledgement of the role that the media played in covering up many of the wrongs that happened. And the second is a national oversight mechanism, something that will ensure that when recommendations are made, that they are carried out.
I'm grateful for the intervention, and of course we must acknowledge the role of the media and others played in this. This was a cover-up at so many levels. And in relation to oversight mechanisms, I don't think this bill is the place for that, but I do agree with the proposition that where there are inquiries, there needs to be a better way of ensuring that there's follow-through on those inquiries. I will.
The Prime Minister has listed a litany of scandals where there has been cover-up. Would he reflect and include in that the Chinook disaster, where there has been repeated attempts to cover up the truth, the state of the aircraft that was sent out that night, in which we lost so many valued members of our intelligence service? Isn't that something that now a wrong that now needs to be righted?
For raising that. This bill is obviously intended to deal with all of the situations where there needs to be a duty of candour, with consequences if that isn't adhered to. So I'll just make some progress. I will take further interventions. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now turn to the bill itself, and first of all to the duty of candour. There are three parts to this. First, a new statutory duty of candour. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the Hillsborough Independent Panel, Bishop James Jones found that over 100 statements by junior police officers have been deliberately altered to remove evidence unfavourable to the South Yorkshire Police. 100 statements have been deliberately altered. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think there's anyone in this House who could possibly disagree that we must never let anything like that ever happen again. It is a disgrace, and the bill before the House will tackle it. I'll give way.
Shannon.
Can I commend the Prime Minister and Government for bringing this bill forward? I think it enheartens us all to see the content of it. Does the Prime Minister not agree that with the rise of social media, there is more public scrutiny than ever before and less trust in the institutions? The bill and the Prime Minister's outlining is an opportunity to begin that journey of restoring public trust, and we must be mindful that nothing less than accountability can be acceptable. The public understands that mistakes can be made, but they cannot and should not forget when cover-ups take place.
His intervention, and the bill, the legal provisions to ensure this can never happen again as a matter of law. But I've been clear, and I've said to the families on a number of occasions, it's the culture as well that has to change. The culture has to change. So the bill is the architecture, but the culture has to change of the state. Yes, of course.
I'd like to thank him for giving way. Charlotte Hennessy, whose father, Jimmy Hennessy,
was unlawfully killed at Hillsborough, has had conversations with the Prime Minister where he has assured her that the law does not need to be watered down and will be delivered in its entirety. She's in the chamber today. Will he make that promise in this House today?
Absolutely. I made that promise. I looked the families in the eye. I made that promise and I meant it. And I say it again from this dispatch box. This bill will not be watered down. This is such an important re-orchestrating of the relationship between the state and its citizens. It will not be watered down. I'm very pleased to be able to affirm that from this dispatch box. I'll take one more and then I'll press on.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for giving way? Does he agree that one of the most powerful lessons from Hillsborough, and indeed the other Grenfell and post office scandals, is that truth delayed is justice denied, and that while this bill rightly places a duty of candour upon public authorities, it must also compel ministers themselves to uphold that same duty when addressing this House, so that accountability begins at the very top, including the misleading information that was given from that dispatch box by his minister last week in relation to the hooligan Maccabi Tel Aviv fans.
I really think, with the families here in the House with us...
Order, Prime Minister. I was trying to pay close attention, but I may have missed it. We do not accuse each other of misleading information at the dispatch box. So be mindful of the language that one is using. Prime Minister.
Thank you. I also think that we owe the families a better way to have this debate than descending into party political point scoring, and I hope we can continue the debate in that way, because this bill will tackle that injustice, so that when tragedy strikes and the state is called to account at inquiries, inquests and other investigations, public officials, from police officers to the highest offices in the land, will be subject to that duty, which means that an injustice like this can never again hide in some dark corner of the state. Madam Deputy Speaker, failure to comply, failure therefore to act with candour, transparency and frankness, will now carry criminal penalties, including being sent to prison. Yes.
I am very grateful to the Prime Minister, and as a sponsor of the Honourable Member for Liverpool and East Derby's Private Members Bill, I fully welcome this bill's introduction, and I welcome that protections include criminal offences of misconduct in public life. Could the Prime Minister assure me and others that these new offences will be able to be applied retrospectively?
No, they won't be able to, but that's not a deficiency of this bill. That's a long-standing constitutional rule. It's about what moves in terms of offences that move forward. But can I just make this point, because I do think it's important. These measures will apply across the United Kingdom. And I would like to place on record my thanks to the devolved governments for their collaboration on this. I can also announce the government intends to bring forward an amendment to extend the duty to local authority investigations in England, which will make sure that when an inquiry or investigation is set up by a local authority, for example, the Kerslake inquiry into the Manchester Arena bombings, there can also be the duty of cooperation and candour in the search for the truth. I will.
Extremely grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and I recognise the strength of the case that he's making. He will understand the interest the Intelligence and Security Committee has in Clause 6 of this bill, which provides for certain exemptions for those who work for the intelligence agencies. What it then says is that those people should report internally within their organisation information that may be of use to an inquiry or investigation. Would he give some thought to how the government might develop the concept of what then happens to that information, about which the bill is broadly silent? And he will understand that many will be concerned to ensure that when information is reported internally within the intelligence agencies, it nonetheless finds its way to those who should have it, in order to make a reassurance of what the government is seeking to achieve, I think, more broadly in this bill.
Thank you for that intervention. Obviously, a lot of thought's been given to that particular issue of the security and intelligence services. What the bill, therefore, does is to be clear that the duty applies, but has a different way of applying it. And I think that gets the balance right. And obviously there are various national interests and public interests to protect in so doing. I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and I congratulate him and thank him for bringing forward this bill. This represents an epic struggle by the Hillsborough families, and they're to be much admired and praised. But this will extend beyond this, as the Prime Minister has said. Can I thank him on behalf of the families who suffered great loss under the auspices of the Tees Eskin Weir Valley NHS Trust, Christy Harnett, Nadia Sharif and Emily Moore, as they were lacking that duty of candour when those terrible tragedies struck. And I hope that he can give consideration to a full judge-led public inquiry, because they are in search of truth, justice and accountability.
Well, I thank him for that intervention, and just for his reassurance and for the reassurance of the House and for the families and all the others affected by these scandals. These are provisions in a bill, they're clauses in a bill, they will soon be sections in a piece of legislation. But they're more than that. They're a changing of the nature of the relationship of the state and its duties to its people. And that is so important. Yes, this is the legal architecture, but something much bigger than this has to be put in place. I will take this intervention and I'll come behind.
I thank the Prime Minister greatly, and I welcome this bill. Could I ask him to reassure me and my constituents that those organisations which are contractors to public authorities and public bodies are covered by the provisions of this bill as well, because it's important that where responsibilities defrayed to other bodies, that they too are captured by the clauses in this bill.
She anticipates my next point, but I will make it and then I'll take the intervention from behind, because we have to recognise that some scandals, such as the Post Office Horizon scandal, the boundaries between the public sector and the private sector are complicated. And Clause 4 in this bill applies the duty to some private bodies for that very reason, in answer to her question. In particular, those delivering public functions, those with relevant health and safety responsibilities, as well as relevant public sector contractors. So in the Home Office, in the Post Office case, for Jitsu, for example, for that very reason, because we have to recognise that it's blurred, and we need to make sure that the duty extends appropriately. Yes. I will. No, I'll give way here.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. He knows that for over 2 decades, the legal system failed to provide truth and justice to the Hillsborough families. And it was only a non-legal process, the Hillsborough Independent Panel, that finally set things right on the road to truth, justice and accountability. Does he see any prospect, therefore, of us including in the legislation at a later stage provision to ensure that the Hillsborough Independent Panel type process can be offered to families who are involved in future disasters to try and circumvent this long-standing failure of the criminal justice system and the justice system to offer truth and accountability quickly to families?
I'll start by thanking her for her work and campaign on this over many, many years. And she makes a really powerful point about the independent panel. I first met Bishop James Jones 15 or plus years ago now, and I genuinely think he was amongst the first to listen properly, knowing what listening means, to those that were giving evidence to his panel, which is why he was so well received and respected in the report that he made. And we will certainly give consideration as to whether panels of that like in future can serve a useful purpose. I'll take the other intervention.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and he's been very generous in taking all our questions. And I want to congratulate him for introducing this particular piece of legislation. But can I just ask if the duty of candour can be applied fully to all investigations, including independent panels, and not just statutory inquiries, and that the command responsibility must personally rest with those in charge and not simply the institutions?
Well, it does apply to non-statutory inquiries, so her point is covered within the bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll press on. The second part of the duty of candour is a professional duty of candour for all public servants, because the Nolan principles of public service, honesty, integrity, accountability, selflessness, objectivity, openness and leadership, they're not some kind of optional extra, but the very essence of public service itself. So every public authority will now be legally required to adopt a code of ethical conduct based on these principles and set out consequences for staff who do not comply, including disciplinary sanctions up to and including gross misconduct. Yes.
Giving way. This piece of legislation is a huge step for accountability and transparency for families who must feel like the most impossible of circumstances. Some of those families are living in my constituency and next door in Corby, who are still trying to get clarity about the possibility of dumped toxic waste and contaminated land causing health complications. So could the Prime Minister spell out how this bill will ensure that any public official who abuses their power and tries to cover it up will be held accountable?
Yes, I can confirm that, and I want to emphasise the point again, because it is so significant that out of the most unbelievable suffering, these families, these victims, have pushed for a change that took far too long, will now benefit and safeguard people that they will never meet, they will never know, and I find that kind of campaigning humbling, and we thank them for it. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll just make a bit of progress and then we'll take further interventions. Finally, in relation by a new criminal offence of misleading the public, which is aimed squarely at public servants who willfully mislead the British people in a reckless, intentional or improper way. Cases like Hillsborough, where lies and dishonesty from the state grievously harmed the very people it was supposed to serve, and that must never happen again. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill is not just about the duty of candour itself, because anyone familiar with how justice failed families and victims must also recognise that the lack of parity in our legal system played a significant role. I remember Margaret Aspinall, who I met many years ago now, who's with us today, telling me that she had to scrape together every last penny for legal representation, including the money paid out by insurers for the death of her son, James, who at the time was pretty much the same age as my son, who comes to football with me. That's what she had to do, and we have to recognise that injustice piled on the other injustices. Yes, of course.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister, and can I also join those across this House in welcoming this important legislation and welcoming and aligning myself to all the points the Prime Minister has made. Will the Prime Minister also join me in paying tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Liverpool West Derby, for his tireless campaign to push for this law to reach the statute books?
Hear, hear.
And the Prime Minister is absolutely right. Grieving families have faced the might of the state alone, forced to crowdfund lawyers while public bodies hired whole legal armies. Does he agree that by guaranteeing legal aid at the inquest we can finally end those David and Goliath battles for justice once and for all?
Hear, hear.
Well, can I absolutely extend that tribute to the member for Liverpool West Derby, who I think was at the game and has campaigned tirelessly in this place and beyond this place to help us get to the position today where we can introduce this bill. So I do pay tribute to him. I'm very pleased to do so from this dispatch box as we introduce this important legislation. I'll just make some progress and I will come to the honourable member. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, on the question of parity, what happened and happens in so many cases is that families either have to scrimp and try to find the money for legal representation or have none. And what are they met with at inquests and inquiries? The Hillsborough families were met with this. The working people who have had to save for justice, they were met time and again, by armies of state-funded lawyers, the deep pockets of the state taxpayer money harnessed for the explicit purpose of fighting against justice. So this bill aims to correct this inequality. So justice and the state serve all, with a new duty on public authorities to engage lawyers at inquest and inquiries only where necessary and proportionate, and to ensure that their representatives behave with the sensitivity and respect that victims and their families deserve. Madam Deputy Speaker, the bill will also ensure that no bereaved family has to face an inquest alone, with the largest expansion of legal aid in a decade, granting access to free legal aid for all inquests where the state is an interested party, so that working people like Margaret and the Hillsborough families will never again be faced with such inequality on legal representation, or, as in many cases, simply left with none. I will take the intervention, I promise.
I thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister speaking very powerfully about families and about the human stories, and I commend him for the number of human stories that he has actually talked about today in this place. Would he therefore agree to meet with the families of the Chinook disaster when 29 lives were lost and 2 pilots wrongly blamed? These families have been consistently refused even a meeting with ministers, officials and indeed Prime Ministers that have gone before. Will he do the right thing and meet with them and ensure that this bill covers them also?
I think there may have been meetings, and if not, we'll get meetings set up. I'm being told there will be one, but I will take on board what she says and make sure that there are the appropriate meetings and update her as to exactly what form and when they'll take place. Madam Deputy Speaker, this rebalancing of legal representation is a fundamental change in the balance of power in our justice system, and I genuinely hope that across the House, the whole House will support it, because, Madam Deputy Speaker, taken together, the measures in this bill can be a landmark piece of legislation. I'm determined, as I've already said in intervention, having given my word to the Hillsborough families, having worked in partnership with them on this legislation, that this bill will not be watered down. And when it is in statute, it will rank as one of the great acts of this Labour government, a moment where the tireless campaigning of working people to right a historic wrong was finally recognised in this place and made our country better. That is all the campaigners have ever wanted. This has never been just about Hillsborough, about their families. It's always been about everyone. And Madam Deputy Speaker, if they were to come down to this dispatch box, I won't extend the invitation because I suspect they readily would. I know, because I've heard them from dispatch boxes like this many times before. I know what they would say. They would say, you must keep going. This is not done until it's done. I want to therefore put on record in this House my deep gratitude to everyone who's worked with us on the journey to this point, the Hillsborough Law now, to the honourable members for Liverpool West Derby, Widnes and Halewood, Sheffield South East, who were all at the game, and indeed to so many honourable members from across Merseyside, past and present, as well, of course, to the mayors of Liverpool and Manchester, all of whom have never stopped fighting for this bill, to Inquest, who facilitated so much of the engagement so we could be a government that listened, to Bishop James Jones, who chaired that crucial Hillsborough independent panel, countless other campaigns that this issue touches on, many represented in the gallery as well here today, but most of all, Madam Deputy Speaker, to Margaret, Steve, Charlotte, Sue, Jenny, Hilda, and every single member of families affected by Hillsborough. I know that what they really want is not thanks or acclaim. They want change, and they've waited 36 long years for change. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is my honour as Prime Minister to have brought the Hillsborough Law before this House and to open today's debate. It should never have taken this long, but we are here now and we must get it over the line, a legacy of justice, change and national renewal. for the 97. That is what we are here to deliver today. And I beg to move that the bill now be read a second time.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time, and I call the Shadow Minister, Dr Ciara Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today is a day that first and foremost at the front of our minds will be one group of people, some of whom join us in the gallery. Those harmed by the state, those misled by the state, those lied to by the state. But those same people who refused to accept that, who would not take no for an answer, those people who knew the truth of what happened to them and to their relatives, and who fought on to make sure everybody else knew it as well. The movement toward greater accountability and transparency in public life owes everything to them. The Hillsborough disaster stands as an example that many of our constituents will perhaps think of first. 97 lives were lost on the 15th of April 1989, and many others were profoundly affected, as the Prime Minister so powerfully articulated. As the Prime Minister also pointed out, among them a member of this very House. The member for Liverpool West Derby, he was 16 years old at the time and was a spectator at the match. He's been an unrelenting advocate for those that shared the horror of that day with him and what happened afterwards. As if the tragedy of those events was not enough, what followed served only to compound it over generations. In the decades that followed, despite multiple inquiries, reviews and inquests, the truth of what happened remained obscured by lies, by cover-up. We would all wish to be able to say that this is the only example of institutional defensiveness, of cover-ups, of the reputation of organisations being prioritised over doing what was right. But as this House sadly knows, it's not. Between the 1970s and early 1990s, thousands of UK patients contracted HIV and hepatitis after receiving contaminated blood products and tissues. Reflecting on the findings of his inquiry into the matter, Sir Brian Langstaff said quite simply that people put their faith in doctors and in the government to keep them safe, and their trust was betrayed. Experimentation, deception, cover-up, and there are more examples. We've all been shocked to hear the trauma and the experiences of our postmasters and their families as they were ruthlessly pursued by the Post Office and the CPS over many years, with the failure of successive governments to exercise their oversight to protect them. We've seen other failures in healthcare, in policing, in housing, others well known, others not so well known. Whether 97 lives are lost or just one, the impact on families is lifelong and severe. The themes have been consistent. The resistance of the state to accept its wrongdoing, the aggressiveness of the state in responding to challenge, the willingness of individuals working for the state to put themselves first over the people they're expected to serve. Again and again, David and Goliath battles have played out as the resources of the state in all its forms have been deployed against innocent people, innocent victims. As we reflect on the proposed measures before us today, it's sensible to consider the changes that have been made in this area. On legal representation, the means test for legal help and representation at inquests for applications to the Exceptional Case Funding Scheme has been removed, and we've seen a steady number of applications over recent years. Measures were introduced to promote candour in policing when the offence of police corruption was created in 2017. And in the health service, the duty of candour was introduced following the Francis inquiry into catastrophic failings in health at Stafford Hospital. And through Part 2 of the Victims and Prisoners Act 2024, we legislated for the creation of an independent public advocate whose role is to ensure victims and bereaved families are properly supported and represented after major incidents. But a desire to do more has remained. Bishop James Jones' report, The Patronising Disposition of Unaccountable Power, reflected on the experiences of the Hillsborough families and set out key lessons for public bodies. It called for the bereaved to have proper participation at inquests where public authorities are represented, and identified other key areas for reform, which alongside work by the Law Commission has provided a key basis for the bill before us. However, it should be noted that Bishop James emphasised that legislation alone is insufficient. As mentioned, a statutory duty of candour already exists in parts of the public sector, particularly in the NHS, but question marks remain over the success of its implementation. The lesson is clear. Legal change must be accompanied by cultural change. But in principle, we welcome the aims that underpin this bill, which is what we're asked to consider at second reading. On this House, no matter how laudable the aim, to reflect and consider whether the legislation we pass is as good as to avoid any unintended consequences. It's no secret that despite a very long-standing commitment on the benches opposite to bring legislation of this nature forward, they themselves wrestled with how appropriately to do so. This bill should be one that members scrutinise very closely. If members take a look at Schedule 4, members and our staff are quite rightly listed as being on the extensive list of public servants that will be in scope. Quite rightly. We'll be able to look at the implications of the bill and reflect on it, how it might interact with our work, where contention and disagreement are often at the heart of our working decisions. And as such, there are a number of questions and points for consideration I'd like to raise for the government. Firstly, I'll be sure that the language used in the bill will provide the necessary legal clarity to underpin its successful operation. It makes use of terms like reckless and seriously improper. It states that the Act is designed to ensure that public authorities and public officials at all times perform their functions in the public interest, as a further example. How often do we disagree in this House on what constitutes the public interest? How often do we question the truth of what's being said? While superficially that might seem obvious, where the examples we've considered today are at the forefront of our minds, the failure to act in the public interest is clear and unquestionable. But in other situations, we might be left with conflicting views as to what the public interest is. How will we differentiate between interpretations of the public interest in a way that doesn't allow individuals to escape from the measures being proposed by this bill? We've seen too often government decisions that the government considers to be in the public interest challenged repeatedly and often successfully in the courts. And individual public servants will have their own views of what is or isn't in the public interest. We'll need to consider that. And how will this bill be utilised by campaign groups who wish to legally challenge the government in support of what they consider to be in the public interest? That's not to say that we can't make this bill work, but we need to consider its terminology carefully. Part of the bill deals with the misconduct in public office and represents one of the most significant changes to the way we hold public officials to account. Under these proposals, the common law offence of misconduct in public office will be replaced with two new statutory offences: seriously improper acts and breach of duty to prevent death or serious injury. This follows recommendations by the Law Commission which suggested the current offence be replaced with a clearer statutory provision which is less broad and easier to interpret. The opposition fully recognises that this is an area of the law in need of clarity, but the common law offence, for all its many imperfections, has provided at least flexibility as a means of addressing serious misconduct that might not fit clearly into an approach based on specific statutory offences. So I would be grateful for the government's reassurance on that point. Will the government also share its view about the reduction in the maximum penalties from life imprisonment, as available under the current common law offence, to between 10 and 14 years under the statutory offence? Misconduct in public office strikes at the heart of public trust in government and the rule of law. We must ensure that the penalties available to the courts reflect that seriousness. But perhaps the area where I would most welcome assurance is in considering whether the measures in this bill will fall most squarely, most strongly on the right shoulders. In its critique of the existing legal framework for misconduct in public office, the Law Commission said there was a concern that it tends to be used primarily against relatively junior officials rather than the more serious decision makers that members of the public might more readily expect to be held criminally accountable. Of course, public servants, no matter how junior, are accountable for their actions. But how can we be sure these measures will ensure accountability